Welcome, everybody, to the regular meeting of the Paradise Irrigation District Board of Directors, Wednesday, September 21st at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to ask everybody right now to please silence your cell phone. If you have to make a cell phone call or receive one, please step outside as not to disturb the meeting. If you'd all stand with me right now, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Georgiana, can I get a roll call, please?
Here.
Vice President Lori Duncan.
Here.
President Seth Crowell.
Here.
Director Brooke Jacobson.
Here.
Director Bill Kellogg.
Here.
Thank you, Georgiana. Approval of the consent calendar, item number 2. Is there anybody that it's just all minutes? Is there anything that wants a correction or pulled from it? On item A?
I move we approve the consent calendar as presented.
I'll second.
Okay. Anybody from the public would like to speak to anything on the consent calendar? No? Okay, not yet, Lauren? Okay. Any directors, any comments, discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Now we're going to move on to public participation. Individuals will be given an opportunity to address the board regarding matters not on scheduled agenda, although the board cannot take any action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Opportunity for public comment on agenda items will be provided at the time they are discussed by the board, with comments limited to 5 minutes per agenda item. Is there anybody that would like to speak to something that's not on the regular agenda?
Thank you, Board. Lauren Harvey, Paradise, since 1947. I'd just like to remind the Board that last meeting I was here and people left before I got a chance to stand and remind folks, but the 218 vote is assumed that if you don't vote, it's a yes vote. So if you do nothing, it's a yes vote. And I'd just like to remind people that that's the way it was. So it wasn't that people didn't turn out, or it wasn't that the thing was bad. It was that you guys had the advantage of it was a yes if we did nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to something not on our agenda this evening? Not seeing any, I'm going to close the public participation.
I have a comment about it. Prop 218 was passed by the voters. We just followed the rules of Prop 218.
Thank you, Larry. Item B on public participation. Possible board discussion on or clarification concerning public participation.
I just did it.
So, I don't know who added this on, or are we just leaving that on there as a normal thing?
Yes.
Okay. Was there anybody that would like to talk about that or get clarification? Anything that we heard? Okay. Larry did his. We're going to move on to item number 4, approval of checks. I'm going to start with Director Kellogg.
No comments.
Nothing? Okay. Director Hunt?
I don't know if anybody else saw this, but Kevin's graph on page 19 was missing the bar. He had the numbers in there, but there was no graph showing it.
It was in white.
Excuse me?
It was in white.
Oh, that was it. Kevin, you tricked me.
Right there. The white bar starts right there.
And all of the rest of these, I got George to explain to me yesterday on our road trip. I did ask that the treasurer on his refunds to people who put deposits in, it would help us a little bit, I think, if we would just add the word refund instead of putting down a hydrant deposit that we paid out. It's really a hydrant deposit refund on that particular instance. And that was it in regard to the checks. I got all my answers already.
Okay. Director Jacobson?
I had a question on a purchase again of tires from CTW and
What page?
Chico. That is page
iPad page?
22.
21.
21.
21? Okay.
Right. And that's the third time I've seen this. I know it's come up before, and I'm just kind of curious. Did we actually go out and try to get competitive bids here in Paradise, like at Big O Tire or Les Schwab, before we bought 2 sets of tires from CCW again last month?
I
would assume so.
yeah, I'm not going to say for 100% for sure, because I'm not the one that actually did it. But
No, I
they've
can't
been
ask for the bid sheet yet, but
right, but they've been instructed to do that. So they've been instructed to call Paradise vendors and also Chico or whoever else they feel might have a competitive or better price, and they're supposed to take the one with the best price.
so then I can assume that,
No, the date on that is 8/12. That was before our meeting back in August.
yes, I know that, but this is the third month in a row that I've seen purchases from CTW.
Okay.
Actually brought it up 3 months ago.
And it's been communicated 3 months ago too.
Okay.
Who does that? Who's in charge of the purchasing?
That would be
Keith
Clint
or-
on
or
those
Clint?
type of items. He's the mechanic.
Can we get an answer for Director Jacobson on that from Clint?
Or just bring in the bid sheets.
Yeah, exactly. Was there anything else, Cliff?
There was we purchased aluminum sulfate liquid,
Page?
next page down 23 at the very top. And I was just curious if that's over $4,000, that must have gone out for competitive bidding, but I didn't see anything on that.
Staff, Jim. Have we bid aluminum sulfate recently?
We did it years ago.
But we just renew it every year without looking at competitive bids?
We don't do competitive bids every year. Once we bid it out, it's usually a multi-year process of purchasing because it was competitively bid. We don't believe that it's necessary. For alum, we can certainly start to do that. That would be the only other chemical I would bid on an annual basis. So if that answers your question, I think.
It isn't in regulations that we have
General chemical.
bids on items over a
I
certain
was
dollar?
just going to ask if it was an annual.
Alum, alum
Well, I'm not specifically hitting that. I'm hitting the fact that it was a material that was over $4,000. And it was my understanding, according to the Purchasing Policies and Procedures Manual, Chapter 12, that should be going out for competitive bid each time you purchase it, unless I'm misunderstanding that.
We'll look into it and report back to you.
Okay, thank you. I think that was the only questions I had on that.
Director Duncan?
Oh, let's see.
Thank you, Cliff.
I was on page 20, AECom. How much, do we owe them more money than this?
Yeah, so I believe that we're about 250,000 more to them.
Do that, okay. That was my question. Safety supplies on page 21. Didn't we used to call that something different with the boots? I thought we called that something different than safety supplies.
I think we've always called it.
Have we have it? I thought there was something else.
Because they're steel-toed.
Yeah, right, okay. It just hit me as being different, that's why I asked. Okay. Comp, on page 21, Comp Inc., health insurance claim. Is that,
Which one?
Comp Inc.,
That's a workers' comp.
Workman's comp, okay. On page, let's see, page 24, national meters. We have, what are these? 35 register and
Model 35.
model
One of the second line, the bottom line, is the meter itself,
Uh-huh.
and the upper one is the register and the Firefly.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, and, let's see,
That's just our on-hand stock.
is that just not, yeah, okay.
It's inventory.
North Star Electrical and Pump, hydrant deposit, we're I guess we're refunding them.
Yep.
But who is North Star Electrical? Are they building something here?
They needed a hydrant meter, so I don't know.
Oh,
I'm assuming
okay,
it's
I
for-
just
for
never heard the
construction.
name, that's why I was curious. Okay. See. Okay, yeah, I just want to point out to the public, the reason I like to review these things in public is so that other directors realize that what's happening too. And if we don't do it in public, then we have to waste the staff's time by asking them personally. And I figure it's a better thing to do here it's more efficient to do it here at the meeting. That's why I like this. That's all I have.
Thank you, Director Duncan. On page 26, it's the State Water Resource Board. That's our yearly fees. It says large water system fees, 7/1, but the date was dropped off. Is
That's
that
from 7/1 to 6/30.
of 2017?
That drinking water.
Yeah, SW, the State Water Resources Control Board.
That's the yearly, though.
No,
Yeah,
it's not.
it's,
I don't
it's,
think it's yearly.
that's for sure, it's not an annual.
I think it's quarterly.
Because the date got cut off, so I couldn't see the,
I think that's quarterly because it's gonna go up from about 18,000 a year to 40,000 a year.
Now, will this go away when we get the filtration plant?
No.
no.
Oh, this stays.
No, this is
Okay.
our system fee. Okay, that was the only one that I had. Anybody from the public want to speak to anything on the checks for August? Lauren?
Warren Harvey. I want to publicly thank Mr. Jacobson for getting on this bid stuff more. It appears to me as a person in the public that this thing was kind of run on a good old boy club before. And the other thing I'd like to say is about these bids. If you get a competitive bid from somebody, and they don't raise their price during, say, a 3-year time, I could see no harm, no foul if you went with the lowest bid. But if they've raised their price any since you guys got that bid for chemicals or anything else, it looks like to me it'd be a violation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak to the August checks? Not seeing any. I'm going to close the public participation part of that right now. Any further discussion from board members? I'll entertain a motion.
I move the approval of general fund checks numbers 49689 through 49782 for the months of August 2016, totaling $567,413.19, exclusive of voided checks numbers 49714 and 49738, and authorizing a similar amount allowing or adjusting for extraordinary budget or board approval items during the month of September 2016.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No. Still
Pass.
have that line item that tells us we're going to pay our bills in advance before it comes to the board.
Passes 4-1, Director Kellogg being the no vote. Okay, I'm going to jump around a little bit here. Old business, we're going to move up to item number B. Jim's here for that. The purchase of 4,000 gallons of zinc orthophosphate. Jim, you want to report on what you found? I know Director Jacobson had some questions on it.
Jim's going to explain his calculation sheet for your information.
Yeah.
Can you view full screen? Oh, we'll scroll down where you need us to, Jim.
Okay.
Start at the top.
So, my staff report can be quite complicated. This is not an easy thing to explain. So I prepared this summary because there's so many numbers and so involved with the decision. Wasn't taken lightly. Did a very thorough evaluation. First of all, there's many companies in the United States. Most of them are back east, Louisiana, Texas, or Arizona, but there's a number of them in California that are prominent. These are, I'm not familiar with Brenntag. They may be prominent, never dealt with them, but I've dealt with Karis extensively, well, over my career, and Protech is our current provider. So we, and there was another company that tried to select a product and had a problem with finding a supplier. So I had plans to have 4 bids, but I only ended up with 3. So you can see the comparison of bids. I must say these, looking at the chemical composition, you can see that these chemicals are very, very different. They are not generic. They only are generic in such a way as they do corrosion control. They all have different doses. They have very different manufacturing processes, which are generally called their trade secret. Trade secrets, what they say, are very complicated and involved in the manufacturing of the chemical. Chemical engineers and industrial engineers help figure out how to make this product. And this is a specialty chemical that deals with corrosion control. It's not like alum. It is a lot like the polymers we use at the plant in a way. Polymers are even more complicated and more difficult. But of Brenntag's suggestion of the best product that they provide, they mentioned 3. They started off recommending one product. They changed to another one, thinking that was the best product. Then they changed to another one. So it took them a while to best fit the right ZOP chemical for us. The other 2 companies, Karis and NTU, had no problem doing that. So I think I have the best Brenntag product there, a 301C, bid by Brenntag, as well as Karis and Protech. They do the same thing as corrosion control, but they are very different chemicals. And as we go down, we can see that the doses are very different. Dose is critical in water treatment. And as you see, the doses are all different for each chemical. Now, these doses are based on the suppliers, technical specialists telling us where to start with the dose. And once we actually start using a chemical, the doses will change based on actual operations and chemical tests in the distribution system. So those doses could either go up or down, and the cost will change significantly. That's why it's very important to try to explain to you apples-to-apples comparison. You can see on the third line on top, purchasing the chemicals, there's 2 that are very similar. There's one that's a little bit different. And you can see on the bottom the equalized dose per cost, those are, again, similar and one is very different. Now, how do I explain that? Well, you have to use dose to compare apples to apples. And dose will change. As well as, like I mentioned earlier, the cost will change. So this is the best estimate by the suppliers to help determine where we start, and I was able to figure out a very simple calculation. There's nothing difficult with what my board memo mentioned is how to compare apples to apples. And if, George, if you go, okay, you don't need, that's fine. So you can see why I would make a recommendation to continue with ProTech, because the cost, these are actual true costs to operate. Okay, I need to stress that. When you actually start operating it, feeding it, this is really what's happening with our costs. And if we would happen to change to Brenntag, you would actually see the true cost would be something much more substantial than the other two chemicals. But depending on how the chemical performs in the system, it could go down. It may be competitive, but it may not be competitive. Do we want to take a risk when it's completely unknown with a new chemical? I say no. We don't want to take the risk. There's nothing that tells me that Brenntag is better or worse than Keris or ProTech. You only do that by long-term testing, and we've done that long-term testing with ProTech, and it has been providing effective performance. We don't see a lot of our steel pipe having corrosion failures. So let's see if I'm catching all my things.
Jim, I have a question
Yes.
for you.
Fine.
Is NTU Technologies is the company that we use now?
Current, yes.
Okay. And so you guys have worked up to this recommended dose of 2.5 or 2.5 parts per million.
Right.
1.78 gallons per million gallons of water. Okay.
Yes.
So
That's an actual current dose, actual 1.78 is what we feed.
yeah. And so the Brenntag recommended dose, that came from Brenntag?
Yes, sir.
Based upon their knowledge of
Right.
however in depth their knowledge
They're
is
technical experts.
of our water and what we do. And
Well, yes, they do, to properly select any chemical, you have to look at water quality, and they want it to be aggressive, and mildly low aggressiveness to mild aggressiveness, and considered corrosive for this to work. And generally that's how, when I read AWWA manuals, they talk about that.
okay.
Fact.
And same thing with Keris, that recommended dosage of 3.53 gallons per million gallons is their recommended dosage. And the easiest way for me to understand that is our 1.78 for NTU is more concentrated because it takes less of the product per million gallons. So that's why we would use less of that product going in.
Right.
And is there a maximum number of whatever the measure is, parts per million of this stuff that goes in there that's controlled by the health department that says you can't have more than so many parts per million of this type chemical in your drinking water?
My reading is 2, but that's a residual that we can check. But 2 parts per million.
Okay. Because I was reading somebody's process in here. It seems to me like it was the third one, Brenntag. Maybe it was the first one. I'm not sure. But it wasn't our vendors. And they were talking about maybe starting off with a dose of 3 parts per million because by the time it gets down to the end of our pipeline, we may be at only 1 part per million, and I thought, well, this is kind of screwy. Don't we have some health department regulations on what we can have in there, and we certainly wouldn't be able to exceed that.
Well,
Would we, or where do you measure? All through the system?
talking, a very complex question really about dose. When the pipes get coated, the amount of ZOP gets reduced, so you're looking at residual, so you don't want, the 2 is a residual in the drinking water, you don't want to exceed. The dose can be above 2. You're suggesting that,
Okay.
seeing the 3.5 and the 2.4, that's acceptable, but not the residual that remains in the water to drink.
Ken, what you're referring to is,
It's kind of like what you were
what you're
telling me.
referring to is parts per million total product. If you want to look at zinc, you got to look at zinc sulfate, 50% of that is zinc, you got to look at the percentage of that in the formula. That's what you can exceed 2 parts per million with, to the first point of use. So it's not the same at all. 3, 4, 5 parts per million total product do not necessarily equal even 2 parts per million zinc.
All right.
I have a question. This is to keep corrosion from our pipes, the steel pipes?
Metallic pipes, but
Right.
also
If we-
asbestos cement it's
Oh,
effective on.
cement too. The other thing is there a requirement now when somebody puts in a new system in their house, what type of material they use for their system, for their water system?
For their pipes?
Yeah. Is there?
There's building code
There's-
requirements.
Yeah, I
Building
mean,
code.
that's,
The reason I
Out
ask
of
this
our-
is, when I bought my place in '76, I had the system replaced, and it turned out they had black pipe. It was going from the meter to my water system. Luckily, I caught it. But, so that's why I was wondering if there were things to do it. So we're, besides protecting our system, we're protecting the customer's system.
yes.
With this chemical.
And many customers may have galvanized pipe.
Yes, right.
That's very common. That helps protect their pipes.
So if we got rid of all of our steel pipes, we still have to do this for our customers.
Well, of course, if there was any residual left, the customer's pipes would be the last
Last one, yeah.
To see it.
point in the system possibly where they can get benefit. But that's also gets very complicated. It's not as simple as what I just said. There's all kinds of stuff that go into
Those calculations.
which house in Paradise is getting benefit from the,
Right. How, you say you test these to see if they're working? Do you do this when you replace pipe, or do you actually go in and check
no,
it out?
we do quarterly, coupon testing is a recommended way to look at corrosion protection. And there's also looking at the residual in the distribution system is another recommended way,
Very good.
which we intend to start doing.
Okay, thank you.
What parameters have you been testing in the past, zinc or orthophosphate, or both?
That happened many, many years ago. That happened over 15 years ago. So to answer your question, don't have those records.
So, but I mean, you're dosing the zinc orthophosphate in, how are you controlling the residual?
We control the residual automatically by our metering pumps.
But you don't titrate for zinc and you don't titrate for orthophosphate,
No, we don't.
so you don't really know the level.
Well,
We just recently did a test, and it was 0.3 of, so we don't believe that
Orthophosphate or-
we're the
Was it
theory,
0.3
the theory is
orthophosphate?
that in our system, what we believe, Director, is that almost all of our zinc orthophosphate is used up. We see it because, we know that because at the end of the system, we see less of effectiveness. So we're using up all of our zinc orthophosphate. So our residual should be close to zero by looking at it that way.
We've been measuring our effectiveness with coupons in our tanks. So you put a coupon in, and after a certain amount of time, you take it out and send it in to get weighed. So we've been using that method rather than testing for zinc. Going forward, we're going to be testing for zinc.
I would recommend that because we definitely need to make sure that you're not exceeding potable water levels.
We've already purchased the device, so
Okay.
Jim, when you say that the zinc is used up, does that mean
Right.
it's been coated on the interior of the pipes that it's supposed
Yes,
to coat on?
as long as there's bare pipe, where there's still, I think it's called a dielectric, the zinc will, and phosphate will plate out or form a film on the pipe. Once that film's formed, the ZOP will move downstream, hydraulic.
And what would happen if we stopped putting this big long name in the water system?
Well, it could take about a week for it to remove itself by water flow. Our distribution system is very complicated.
Oh, it would slough off?
It would slough off,
Ah.
yeah. And when you can have high velocities in certain areas, that it would slough it off if you stop feeding it. Water temperature can affect it, pH can affect it. Of course, our pH is very stable. You have more questions?
Well, I've got some information I want to pass out, and then I'll have some questions for you after that, if that's okay. Well, I mean, I just want to read something here and maybe explain a lot of what you guys are talking about. So I did a in-depth, I took 2 days to do in-depth research on this whole thing. And I created this paper, and I'm going to read the front for you. It's a detailed analysis of zinc orthophosphate solutions. Orthophosphate is the main corrosion inhibiting ingredient building block for all corrosion inhibitors in drinking water. Orthophosphate combines with calcium hardness in the water to form a corrosion inhibiting film. Many utilities choose to enhance that corrosion inhibiting film by adding zinc to the formulation. When feeding zinc orthophosphates into drinking water, we use orthophosphate residual as the test parameter. The zinc, a positive charge, combines with the orthophosphate, a negative charge, to form a protective zinc orthophosphate film on all metal surfaces. Now, I might say also it does protect cement concrete pipes as well. The normal ratio is typically 3 parts of orthophosphate to 1 part of zinc. This can vary in a formulation depending on the desired intent of the product. For example, if the intended use is for a distribution system that is older and the residual zinc at the end of the system is low because it is taken up by the metals in the piping, then a formula with a higher ratio of zinc may work better. Conversely, if the system is comprised of mostly new galvanized piping or cement piping, or if a small distribution system is there, a formula with a less amount of zinc may be preferred. The ultimate decision on what product to run should be based on routine testing and review of the system being treated. I'll give you a copy of this, Jim, if you want it. Drinking water utilities typically feed a 0.5 to 1 part per million of orthophosphate, measure as PO4. Although this can vary based on cost and review of the results after a reasonable period of time. Now, Paradise Irrigation District currently feeds a zinc-based orthophosphate solution into its distribution system. I've compared the 3 products reviewed by our water treatment plant and arrived at what I feel is a fair comparison of the 3 products. And this is where you and I will probably have to disagree a little bit. We can look at it. Currently, PID water treatment plant is using a product called Protect 301. Now, a little bit contrary to what you said about it being complex trade secret formulas. Here's the formula for 301. 22.5% orthophosphate, 21.25 zinc sulfate. That's it. Now, because it's zinc sulfate, you only take approximately half of that based on molecular weight, but you're going to end up with about 10.63 parts per million, percent of zinc in that formula. The orthophosphate stays at 22.5 because you use the whole thing. Now, at the rate of 2.5 parts per million of total product, which is what you agree Protect 301, that's total product, correct, Jim? 2.5 parts per million, you said?
That's
that
what
was
we're
based-
feeding, yes.
Based on total product. Okay. Now, the orthophosphate residual in a lab solution of distilled water with that formula and that parts per million would be 0.56 parts per million of orthophosphate. And I arrived at that by 2.5 parts per million times the 22.5% of orthophosphate in the formula. Simple math there. I did the same for the Keris 3190. I did the same for the LACO 301C. Now, I came up with the available orthophosphate in all three of them as a multiplier. So at the rate of 2.5 parts per million total product, the orthophosphate residual in the one you're using would be 0.56 parts per million. The Keris would be 0.54 parts per million, almost the same. And the LACO would be 0.925, almost double, okay? Then what I did was I said, okay, how do we compare this? For a cost comparison, and by the way, these are all based on weight, not volume, Jim, as you know. For cost comparison purposes, the cost is calculated at the same dosage. I took your 2.5 because that's what you said you were dosing the product in at. I compared all three of them at 2.5 parts per million to arrive at a cost, and then I adjusted all three of those costs based on the amount of orthophosphate that we should be running in our water, which is between 1/2 to 1 part per million. I took 0.75, or 3/4 of 1 part per million. So if you look on the product you're running, and I think you'll agree, it was 1641 for 1 million gallons, correct?
What his chart says.
Jim? Is that correct?
Yes, that's what we
Okay.
had.
Then I took the Keris product for 2.5 parts per million. It was $8.49, about half. Then I took the Brintag product, and it was $13.60. So it was higher. Not as high as the NTU, but higher than the Keris. But then, for comparison, I used 0.75 parts per million of PO4 or orthophosphate as a multiplier to equal them all at the same dosage. So NTU's residual would be 0.75 divided by 0.56 because that's the residual that you had in your actual 2.5 parts per million, okay? So that's a multiplier of 1.34. Then I took the Keris at 0.75 divided by 0.54 because it was almost the same, and I came out with a multiplier of 1.39. Then I took the Brintag, and I know this sounds a little complicated, but I'm bringing it home here in a second. I took the Brintag residual, 0.75 divided by 0.925 because it was more concentrated. It has a multiplier of 0.81. When I adjust them all, to feed the NTU, it was $32,984.10 for 1 year, based on 1,500 million gallons of water. The Keris was only 17,701.65, and believe it or not, the Brintag was only 16,524. Why? Because Brintag was the most concentrated of the three. The other two were almost identical, yet the Keris started at half the cost of the NTU, but it had within 1% of the same phosphonate, or of the same phosphate. So basically, and I noticed that, and this is where I think you need to take a look at it. I know you're going to say we went by what they gave us as dosages to start by. So I don't want to ambush you here. But I'm looking at the details that you put in here, and they simply said to dose a 1 milligram solution of orthophosphate residual, not total product, orthophosphate residual. So you compared 1 part per million of orthophosphate with Keris against 1 part per million of total product of NTU. Not a fair comparison, because You only gave, because it's only a percentage, so that's why Karis said you'll need 3.48 gallons to dose 1 part per million orthophosphate. But you weren't dosing 1 part per million orthophosphate with the NTU, you were only dosing 0.56. So when you actually average them out, they're both almost identical. Is my math wrong there, Jim?
Well, the best comment I can make right now is that the chemical, when you're looking at chemical composition here, and percent zinc content those are the correct percent zinc content and percent orthophosphate. And I see some variations here in which begin your calculations.
Okay.
Now, the Karis is correct.
Okay.
They're quite a bit of difference.
In what?
Okay, for instance, the biggest difference is zinc in the Brentag product.
Okay.
It's not 19, it's what I report up there.
It's
It's
19.24.
not. It's 12. That was confirmed by their technical product manager. It's 12. So that, beginning your calculations with something that's quite different. And then also, when you look at Protec, the zinc is actually 13. These values were confirmed by the supplier. They exist in the safety data sheet, which I go by.
Okay.
But at one point, you didn't believe that the safety data sheet was applicable to this exercise. It is. It's confirmed by the NSF, Standard 60, and that's where I believe the information is correct.
NSF has nothing to do with SDSs. SDSs are a plus and a minus.
Yeah.
You don't have to list the exact level of an MSDS. You got to list the range.
Can I jump in here?
So, George,
Range.
hold on just one sec. George, I want you to.
I just want to jump in. I don't think we should be debating between the board and Jim. You presented your calculation in case. We've presented ours. I think at the end of the day, when we test residuals in the system, we're going to feed what needs to be fed. So there's no point in arguing here in a very technical nature that most people aren't going to gather anyhow.
I get that, George, and I don't expect them to get it. I do expect Jim to get it. And I spend a lot of time crunching these numbers, and I'll put them, I'll stand behind them. They're correct. I triple checked them, and what it boils down to is if you buy the NTU residual, you're paying double what you should be paying to get the zinc orthophosphate protection. And the zinc orthophosphate is not complex. The only reason there are different products out there is because no two systems are in the same condition and no two waters are exactly alike. And so the aggressiveness of the water and the condition of your system and the length of your system will determine the product that's most appropriate for your use. Zinc versus orthophosphate in different ratios, and you learn that if you put it in the system and then you actually titrate for the residual at the end. Mm-hmm. If you're not titrating for the residual, you don't have a clue if it's doing any good other than corrosion coupons, and you could quit the treatment and still get good corrosion coupons maybe in some instances. So unless you're actually testing for the residual, you don't even know if the ratio of what you're using is correct. You're just guessing.
And I appreciate you bringing that to the table, which is why we're going to be testing for the residual going forward.
And
it's
that's great.
Your expertise that sent us down that path, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. What I'm saying, though, is I can't in good conscience purchase NTU as a board member because, to me, we're paying double what we need to be paying for a product that isn't complex, isn't any better, and when you actually compare them apples to apples, and I think, Jim, if you take this back and take the time to look at my numbers, and I can get you these formulas if you don't believe they're accurate. I know they're accurate because I got them from the source, okay? And SDSs, I got lots of SDSs out there. All I got to do is say it's between 5% and 10. It could be 7. But if you say 10 or 5, both is wrong. But when you're looking at the actual formula, that's the only way you know. I didn't use SDSs. I used the exact numbers so that I wouldn't make any mistakes.
What's an S?
Safety data sheet.
And where do you get the exact?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm familiar with them with ag chemicals for spraying, killing things with herbicides or insecticides. And the safety things, that you look for certain things. Usually it's residuals and other things, or half-lives of the chemical and so forth. And then it's based off of that. And there's tests on rats and all sorts of things to come up with these things. But they don't tell you exactly what the formulation is. But each manufacturer tries to hide that as much as they can, and there's several brands of like the very chemical 2,4-D on the market. Now, titrate, if I remember back to my chemistry days, that's simply a small sample, and what do you do when you titrate it? This water sample for zinc.
Well, they haven't been titrated.
No, I'm asking.
We'll use a colorimeter to do that.
What's a colorimeter?
It's a product distributed by Hawk Company that use reagents, and the reagents turn a sample a certain color, and then the colorimeter instrument is able to determine the residual.
Sort of like a pH chart where you run a pH.
It turns a light from light color to dark color, and the colorimeter is calibrated
Or
or
you get
designed.
another chart where you could run a sample out in the field for nitrates in a plant.
Yep, we can run these in the field.
Yeah.
So these are based off of the product that you're testing, so the colorimeters would be different from other things. So it'd just be one thing used for zinc.
The instrument will do both.
It's
But
just a
yeah, you
different
change
set of
reagents.
that gives you different results.
And the
Different
instrument,
reagent.
we can take this instrument and
Yeah.
look all over our distribution system, because there will be could be changes from block to block, area to area.
Now we don't know for nothing, right?
No, we do know. We do coupon testing.
You do what?
It's called coupon testing. They're little metal strips that you insert into the water.
Where do you put them at?
At all the tanks.
Anyplace else?
No, we think that the coupon is a cross test, right?
60 miles
Cross
of-
section.
60 miles of deteriorating pipe in the system?
At the different zones is where we're checking for our corrosion protection.
Coupons they're either going to give you erosion or they're going to give you a buildup on it, depending on whether you got scale or depending on whether you've got corrosion. So if it's passive, you know, no added scale, and you've got no erosion or corrosion, the coupon weighs what it did when you put it in, then you've got passive water.
Cliff, can you explain to the audience and the directors what your background is in this work? How do you come about with all this knowledge?
40 years of formulating chemicals and writing SDSs, manufacturing cleaners, sanitizers, and water treatment compounds for potable water, food plant sanitation, boiler water treatment, wastewater. So
Jim, what is your background?
I've operated 7 different water treatment plants in my career of over 30 years. I'm the highest grade in water treatment, distribution, and also have a high level of wastewater treatment certification. So I've actually operated the treatment plants. The operators that work with me have similar certifications. I have the highest of all of them, but all my operators agree with my staff report. Now, all the technical nature of calculating, I asked the technical experts about, well, how did you figure out this dose? And they said it's very complex. You don't really want to know. And it's and now I want to know.
okay.
But I'm not sure if that'll do me any good, because we look for residuals, coupon testing, as those sorts of things. We do trial and error of finding a dose, and then we do analysis in the distribution system, and we move the dose accordingly. Knowing all of this detail is not necessary. All these products will work if you dial in the dose. Now, but we're here to figure out which is cheapest. Your calculation on the, how we calculated this is something we need to debate. I don't want to go on and debate.
I was thinking, because now we've thrown this, we've got two different sets of numbers. Obviously, they come out with different results.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's going to take what it takes.
That's not the point, George.
So, no, but the decision here for purchasing is with this board. We will work with whatever decision you have.
Okay.
Cliff has been in this industry 40 years. He knows what he's talking about. We're not going to argue whether he's got more creds than this guy. The
not a
bottom
problem,
line is,
George. I
we
get
welcome your input. We appreciate it. We came up with our best shot of making apples to apples. You presented one. We're fine with whichever one the board wants to go with. We're more than happy to work with it.
Well, okay. So, and again, I apologize if I put you on the spot. It wasn't my intention. But I did, after, I only had a couple days after I got the minutes to look at it, and I realized there were some, what I thought were errors, and I wanted to make sure I had my facts straight. And at the end of the day here, as I say this, here's the deal. You and I both agree zinc orthophosphate solution, ZOP. The only thing that matters is the cost and the right ratio for our system, okay? The Karis product and the NTU are pretty darn close to the same product. Yeah. They're so close, they are.
Those numbers don't.
Those are the numbers that, Jim, those are the numbers you put up there, but those aren't the correct numbers, and that's why you don't see it. Because you compared orthophosphate residual to total product residual, and that's how you
Put up
came
there
up
what
with the error.
the technical documents tell me to put up there. There's
Okay,
no-
Well,
hold on one
aside
sec.
from that.
Hold on one sec. Were we not under a time constraint? We were running out of this material?
Yes.
And we needed,
Yeah, we need to
we
order.
needed a decision because of that.
True.
So, there's no real way now, I think, three of us who are not in the chemical, four of us who are not in the chemical, and Bill's got some chemical from what he does. The three of us, I'm pretty sure, do not have any chemical experience, or at least to this extent, to where we can make a grade.
I've never taken a chemical.
I hear staff's recommendation. I can see the numbers that Jim's presented. I can see the numbers that Cliff's presented. Obviously, there's huge discrepancies both ends of the scale. The Karis seems to wind up in the middle no matter how you slice it, but we seem to have some discrepancies. So are we willing to set these guys together so we can maybe make sure that everybody's math is correct? I trust both of them as having a correct calculator with batteries in it, and it's working fine, but it seems like we've got some pretty big discrepancies here. I don't know how I can.
Why don't we do this?
I can make a decision based on what we're seeing here.
Well, I would like to ask a common sense question, and when I get a chance, go ahead,
Sure.
Cliff.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let's
Oh.
get it out there.
Okay, well, as I was reading through the board packet over the weekend, I came to George Monday. I don't know. Maybe I called Sunday. I don't recall. But anyhow, it confused me, and George checked back with you, and I said, what I don't understand is you've got this 1 part per million. The second person has 2.5 parts per million, and the third one has 2.0 parts per million. But then the very next figure right next to them is the one that I was kind of hanging my hat on because I could understand it. And if we're buying 4,000 gallons of stuff, and we're going to have to put in 3.53 gallons recommended by the first vendor. And out of our 4 million batch for vendor number 2, we're only going to put in 1.78 gallons. And out of our third batch down there for vendor number 3, we're going to have to put in 2.4 gallons. Then it tells me just those numbers, because we're going to get a 4,000-gallon tanker truck, and it's delivering 4,000 gallons of stuff. And we're going to dump it into our water in a rate, maybe a rate per gallon or a part per million, I don't know. But it sounds like a rate per gallon. So clearly, we're going to run out of that 3.5 gallons for 1.5 billion gallons of water, that we're going to use.
Right.
So your calculations were correct in that manner. I don't care what it
Not
weighs.
true.
I don't care what the nuclear weight is, or those other categories that they had on there. If those are the true dosages that we have to put in, which is 3.5 gallons of our mix for 1 million gallons of water, then your cost of using the product is correct for the 4,000 gallons.
Yes, well, actually, we're going to run out. If you go begin dosing the Karis product, you'll run out in 275 days. You'll make it a whole year.
You got to buy 2 loads of that.
Not true.
If you're using it by
You're
the gallon, you
calculating
are.
one based on total orthophosphate and the other
On
based on
residual.
total product.
No, I'm
You're
not.
Well,
I'm calculating it based upon putting in a
the
gallon of
numbers that
product.
he gave you based on that, Ken, they're not correct. They're not correct.
Well, I thought that
Now
the
you're
Karis gave the numbers of
One,
3.53 gallons, no?
you're saying that the supplier doesn't know what they're doing.
no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that the supplier says in their tech bulletin, if you want to dose 1 milligram per liter of orthophosphate residual, here's what it will take.
That's
Now,
not what I asked
the other
them to
guy
give me.
says, if you want to dose total product, here's what it will take.
I
You're
asked them-
comparing apples and oranges, they're not
I
correct.
asked them to tell me how much product they recommend dosing.
That's not what this says, Jim. If you read this, it says to dose 1 milligram per liter of orthophosphate. Then it goes on to dose 2 milligrams per liter. This is what it would take.
But you called
But
directly,
we're not
Jim?
dosing 1 milligram per liter. We're only dosing 0.54, one half that. And that's the same dose you're giving with your NTU product. So when you equalize them, they're almost identical.
But then they reduce it. They make it simple for me as an operator. It's 3.53 gallons per million gallons. The operators figure that out.
3.53.
And I can figure that
to
out.
get one
Per
part
million.
per million.
Per million.
To get 1 part per million of orthophosphate.
See, that makes
But
it-
you're currently only feeding it half a part per
But it
million.
makes it simple for operators to operate and dose the chemical. This is a correct dose.
That's my point.
But your point is getting too technical.
No, it's not technical at all. You're trying to say the Karis product is half the strength.
It is.
It's
7%.
no, wrong.
Okay.
I
Well-
just gave you the formulas. They are not. The Karis has 21.5% orthophosphate. The NTU product that you're currently using only has 22.5, 1% more. Out of 100, 1%.
But what about the zinc?
The zinc is the same. You got, in the Protect 301, you got, it says 21.25, but that's zinc sulfate.
Weighted value.
It's only half of that. So it's 10.63, okay? In the Karis, it's 7.16. So it's a little lower in the zinc. Hence my question, what was your zinc residual? Because really, you ought to know that so you know which ratio product is actually better for you.
Sorry, I don't have
Okay?
that.
Well, that's fine, but we will, down the road. But if you look at the Brintag product, it's actually 19.24% zinc, okay?
No.
And 37% orthophosphate.
But that's not what the technical product manager told me. I don't
Okay,
know where
so
you're getting
you-
that number.
So you get suggestions from people, but what I'm telling you is, as a director and as a guy who knows these
Yeah.
products, I'm trying to equalize it for you and say, Jim, this is a smart thing for
Well-
us to do. This is what makes sense, and I know it to be true, and I can prove it, given the time. That's why I was gonna make a suggestion, okay? I know we gotta move
Please.
on here. We're talking a whole bunch of money, all right?
We are.
Why don't we agree, the board agree, that we will go with whichever one of the three, Jim and I sit down and decide after reviewing it and not taking up everybody else's time is the most appropriate one to purchase. How about that?
Well, that was
Does that work?
exactly where I was going to go, is you two sit down together, talk to the guys on the phone, put it on a conference call.
Here's
so
the
you can hear
problem
it.
I have. Brentag would never have a talk on the phone. The other two talk to me. The salesperson for Brentag is only a mouthpiece, conduit to their product manager, their technical managers. I have no confidence in the responsiveness of Brentag. Another problem I have dealing with them.
Okay, so you have an outlet to get to that guy.
Their sales representative was adequate to write up a quote, not adequate to provide any technical questions. So the fact is that their product managers, I don't believe, want to engage their clients. You are a distributor of Brentag. You have an in with them. That's fine. And that's how we can possibly get into the technical nature of, and I can say,
I
why
can
is
put-
this the discrepancy between what he's saying and I say? So
Obviously,
that's
that's
the
where we're
only way
getting
we
at.
would
I can
be
put
able
you
to
and
talk
I
to
in touch
Brentag.
with the guy in Brentag International that knows probably more about zinc orthophosphate solutions than
Yes,
people
I
put
would.
together.
I would believe
you and I
that.
can talk to him
Aye.
on a
Do we want
conference
to
call.
make a motion to have
fact,
Director
here, I-
Jacobson and Jim sit
for you,
down
too.
together and with whatever they arrive at as the best solution?
That's for you. That's zinc orthophosphate solution.
I'm going to make the
Not-
motion.
Not yet.
The thing
Okay.
is, we got to remember that if something goes wrong, who gets in trouble?
Yeah.
well,
The
the,
boards and Jim
fortunately,
gets in trouble.
fortunately, we're not talking poisons, I guess.
No, we're not talking.
No, we're talking a
But still,
corrosive
there was
inhibitor.
something said here that concerns me, and that is that you're a distributor for Brentag.
Yep.
Okay. I think that this is a problem.
Pointed that out. We pointed
in
that
a
out in the
potential.
Then buy the Karis product.
But
I
it
don't
is
care.
yes.
It's a better
Look at-
deal than,
Look at the other two, but don't discuss Brentag, because that has it could give a conflict appearance to the public, and if we can just stay away from it. Well, you said there's 79 people on the list that you
76,
gave.
I think. But
Okay.
if you've dealt with Karis before, I've never dealt
Years
with
ago.
Karis.
Years
Karis
ago.
has a whole product line. They only gave you one. They've got different ratios of zinc to orthophosphate.
Yeah, I
That
think
price is
They
competitive.
have two products. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They've actually got more than two, but.
They don't. Well,
that's a good way to
Fit
work
our
it out.
bill.
Let the guys who know what they're talking about get together, and they both come to agreement. If they both don't come to agreement after a period of time, then you're going to have to call a special board meeting back, whether we're going to go with Cliff or whether we're going to go with him if they can't do it.
I'm
But
sure we can come to an agreement.
I would think so. Yeah.
My only interest here is doing my due diligence. You asked me to be on the board to do the best job I can. And what I'm saying right now
Well,
is.
that's what we wanna find.
When I analyze three of them, I see a much better deal, and we need to make the best choice for us. So if that's agreeable to everybody else, I have no problem sitting down with Jim, and I'm sure that when we get done, we'll arrive at the appropriate product that gives us the best.
So do we have a legal way to put
Yeah,
this in a
so-
motion?
Can I jump in
Go
for
ahead.
a middle ground? That both of your analysis put Karis close to the one you're recommending.
Well, actually, no, the Brentag is a little better deal, but
It's a little better
this is,
deal.
there's
But
one
it,
little
but
thing,
it,
I want to add one little thing, and then I'll quit talking about this, but when we put the zinc in our water, it ends up in the wastewater. And I added that to the back of my sheet here, and in the EPA report I just gave you, you're going to read about that as well. Here's the deal. If and when we get a wastewater system, or we decide to go with the trunk line down to Chico into the POTW down there, zinc is becoming to be on the hit list for digesters at wastewater treatment plants. So, we need to use a zinc product that is used up by the end of our circuit and not giving a residual that eventually ends up in the wastewater. So, choosing the appropriate product, we might pick it now, and once you guys start testing, you go, wow, we need a higher zinc level, or wow, we got way too much zinc at the end of the run, in which case the next time we bid it, we need to look at a different ratio. That's why we need to be doing the testing, so we know which product to buy intelligently.
I like where George was going. Karis is a similar product. I'd like to resolve this now with board voting for Karis as a way to mediate this.
I'd like to make a
Move
motion.
forward.
Are you good with that, Cliff?
I'm personally not good at technically dealing with a director who obviously looks at technicalities where I look at it in a way more general way. I don't want to become, you're splitting hairs.
I have no problem. It's half the price of the NTU. If you want to go with Karis,
I'm really comfortable with Karis.
I'll make a motion, let's make a motion to
Thank you.
buy the Karis, what was that number, 3190, zinc orthophosphate product, with the data that we have here, I guess. The purchase is at 4,000 gallons,
Yes.
okay? And do we need to put an exceed limit on it? I don't
No,
think we
that's just
can.
it.
It's the number right here. It's the
That's right, yeah, you got,
36
Karis 3190.
yeah, okay, the 3190, I'm talking about.
$36,960 for a load.
No,
No.
it's
That's two loads.
18,000.
Well, that's two loads.
Yes,
You don't need two
It's
loads.
true.
So just
We
buy-
will before the end of the year.
yeah,
No.
but buy one now.
Buy one now.
We're going to buy one load,
Time
yes,
out
one
here.
$4,000 load.
Okay.
It's almost identical to the product he's using, and if you run it at the same rate, 4,000 gallons is going to last you the same amount of time.
Okay, so the motion is
At
to
half the
buy
price.
one load of Karis 3190 zinc orthophosphate.
4,000 gallons.
Second.
One load's 4,000 gallons. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Anybody from the public would like to comment on this? PhDs in chemistry, anybody? Want to step forward? Okay. Any more comment or discussion from the directors?
Yes,
Okay.
when we deal with chemicals for herbicides or pesticides, on the label, they have the percentage of active ingredient. And the carrier will be noted if it's a certain kind of carrier, in other words, if it's an oil-based one or something else, because if you want to put a wetting agent with it of some sort, you need to know what kind of carrier it is in the product. So you can, how the rates or recommendations are made up is on the percentage of active ingredient. We're not doing that, are we? We're not basing our rates off the percentage of active ingredients in the thing.
They are. This 13% 's active zinc. This for Protec, and 12 for Rentag, according to my information. And it's.
Yes,
I mean, I have to realize that why Cliff believes it's 19. I want to understand that. What the difference is between
Right
our
now,
numbers.
the district is throwing away at least 10 grand to do this compromise, which isn't much of a compromise at all. You're getting the same product you're already using.
No,
I think it's a good deal.
Bill, no.
It's 18,000.
No, if you look at my numbers, okay? It's
Go
actually,
back, go
it's
back to the
actually
other
not
number.
that much worse. The NTU, they're, if
Go
we
Kevin.
ran 0.75%,
Kevin,
they'd spend
go back to the last
32,000.
chart.
If they
It's
buy the
18.
Carousel, they'll spend
Thank you.
17. If they buy the Brentag, they'll spend 16. So it's only within a grand.
It's within
Very,
$1,000.
I'm happy with that. That's half what they were gonna pay
Okay.
for the NTU. because it's gonna last the same amount of time as the
Okay,
NTU.
I'll agree with you.
That was the only mistake that was made.
Yeah.
When you did the calculations, it's an honest mistake. I saw it right away. You compared total orthophosphate to total product, and the phosphate was only half of the other product. That's why you said Karis would only last half as long, because you tried to run it at twice the level.
Disagree. Sorry.
Okay, well, we're gonna see,
Well,
right?
we're going to,
But
we've got a
I would-
motion.
What
We've
I
got a
want to agree
motion.
with is, you asked for not cost not to exceed. That one load of Karis is $18,466.
Okay.
You agree with?
So I was pretty damn close
Instead
when I.
instead of making
this
an
was pretty-
expenditure of $36,000.
This-
Sounds like a good deal, right?
I was pretty close. I was
Let's go
pretty
with
close
that.
when I came up with 17, and I didn't even know the number you got for it, so.
What was your number? Well, we don't
The
need to.
cost for the
I don't think we need to-
Karis is
we don't need to amend it.
$18,466.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second in the effort of moving forward tonight, and hopefully this all works out. Roll call vote, Georgianne.
Director Hunt?
Yes.
Director Duncan?
Yes.
Director Jacobson?
Yes.
Director Kellogg?
Yes.
President Corolla?
Yes, passes with a vote 5-0.
Move.
May the force be with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim, for your time.
Thank you, Jim. Apologize if I put you on the spot. It was not my intention.
Okay, we did item B in old business. We are going to now move to item 6, new business, item C, because Mickey's here also, and we'd like to, yay, we're going to get you up here so we can get you moving into your evening. Not that this isn't super exciting for you, I'm sure.
Very excited.
My part is going to be much shorter.
Promises, promises.
So for years, we had Wayne Howe as the IT consultant. He, as of in March, he's no longer our consultant. He's pretty busy with what he's doing. So just to make sure that we're covered in the case of an emergency, or if I'm gone, I felt we needed to replace that consultant. So I did a request for a proposal, and I got 4 bids. 2 from Chico, 2 from Paradise. Basically, VistaNet and BTS. They are a little bit more, they're about 110 an hour without an agreement. My focus really was not just the cost, but the availability, having somebody who the district can count on, because it's just the kind of thing where if you have an emergency, it doesn't really matter,
What the dollar amount was.
Well, yeah, but you're going to need somebody, and VistaNet and BTS and Gray Matter, they were all good and they could do the job, but if they're not available, then it's not going to matter. So ATS, it really came down to availability and commitment to the district, and as well as, he's from Paradise and local. And I invited Andrew Boone tonight in case you guys had any questions.
He's ATS? Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep.
I'd like to, because I hadn't heard of him before.
That's pretty much it. I mean, I hope it's clear. If you have any questions, though, I'm here.
Well, I had a little confusing question. Maybe Andrew wants to take it. Did I say that right? Andrew?
So it gets
Come on up,
recorded.
Andrew.
On the chart here, it shows support hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But somewhere back in reading through your verbiage, it said something about call me during my regular business hours of 8 to 5, or what? It was an odd number. It wasn't 8 to 8. It was, maybe it was 10 to 5:30.
My normal business hours are 10 to 6.
That's what you said. Yeah.
But those hours of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. are my cutoff for a scheduled appointment at the $80 an hour rate.
Oh.
So if you're going to call me to come in after 8 o'clock at night and before 8 o'clock in the
It's-
morning, I'm going to charge the emergency rate regardless,
Even if we book the appointment a week in advance? Okay,
if I have to work at night.
excuse me?
If I have to work at night,
Yes,
yes.
yeah. No, well, not only at night, but after 8 p.m.
After 8 p.m.
Not too many people here at 8 p.m.
All right. Now I understand why you had presented it that way. It confused me there for a bit.
I have provided emergency service to places in the past that did need night service or weekend service, and I just wanted to make sure that was covered, even if that's not something you need. I just want to make sure that all 24 hours are covered.
Well, I imagine with some of our stations, we have to have them up and operational within a matter of minutes of, hours, but not days.
We run a treatment plant 24/7.
Yeah?
So with you, let's say you're going on vacation, are you going to be providing us with a schedule of what your planned
Yes.
vacations
Basically,
are,
if I'm gonna
during the
be out
course of the
town,
year?
If I'm going to be out of town, I'm expecting to coordinate that with Mickey and make sure that you guys are covered one way or another.
Okay.
How long have you been in Paradise?
I grew up in Paradise, graduated Paradise High School in 2001, went to LA for a while to do college, and got started doing some custom database work when I was down there. Decided to leave because starting to have kids and having a family, decided to come back here to Paradise, and got into, since there's not a lot of custom database work in Butte County, got into basic computer repair. I've been doing workstations and networks mostly. And that's been going for about 5 years now. Just opened my own business a little over a year ago. So I've been in business myself about a year and 3 months now, and just opened a computer repair shop on Skyway a month and a half ago.
What's the address?
It is
For my own
relatively
this is
new.
For my own benefit.
Skyway.
It's 5389 on Skyway.
Okay, thank you.
So do you have any type of potential backup person that you would be able to put us in touch with or to use in your stead should you become disabled, extremely ill, you're in the hospital, and we needed something? Or would we just be on our own to find our own alternative?
Unfortunately, I do not. It is just me running the business. I generally stay in good health. I'm not often sick, but I unfortunately don't have another reference.
Not even
to
other
give you.
companies that you would say, I recommend
Well,
you go here.
here's my problem. I've kind of bounced around from tech shop to tech shop in Butte County. I've been in 3 of them now over the last 5 years, and I have to say I'm pretty disappointed with everything I've seen. A lot of the guys don't do the job right. A lot of the guys will overmark jobs just to ludicrous amounts. They don't bother to find out the information they need to know to complete the job. They just sort of throw a passable fix at it instead of actually making sure that things are configured correctly. I have one friend that I would recommend to actually take care of you guys. Unfortunately, he called me back and just said I can't have anything else on my plate. So I did look into having a backup past myself, and I honestly don't have anybody in Butte County that I could recommend.
Well, VistaNet's available as a, yeah, I was going to say they do.
We use VistaNet. They're
Without an
still a
agreement.
good resource for us, and I like having ATS and the commitment and the small shop size, because really the less individuals you have accessing your system, you have a little bit more accountability for those individuals, and that's an aspect that I like about that. And VistaNet has always come through for us. They can't always respond when we need them to, but if we're in a pinch, they're familiar with our systems, and we can call them.
have to pay them that $800 agreement per month if we call them?
Not an emergency.
They're in a,
No, the $800 is for a commitment level to say we will respond within 4 hours, and that's for them staying up to date on our systems and always watching things. So, I mean, it's a nice thing to have a management agreement, but we can get a lot of, $800 is a lot of hours of work that we can pay for with ATS.
And ATS is our backup to Mickey too, so that's the secondary level, so.
yeah,
We'll always be good help on one side.
yeah,
Like you have the
exactly.
fastest response time.
Live just down the road.
Any other questions from the board? For Andrew or Mickey? Anybody from the public that has any questions relating to item 6C? Not seeing any, I'm going to close the public participation part of this from them.
I move approval to authorize the general manager
Gil?
to execute an agreement with ATS Computer Repair for technological consulting services.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes with a vote 5-0.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time. Okay, we're going to jump back. Going to go to old business, item 5A, capacity fees. We put this out to the Finance Committee to look into it. And Director Hunt, would you like to tell us what you found?
Yeah, Finance, we can sum this up pretty quickly.
What were you
Finance
recommending?
Committee met on Thursday, September 8th. We did have public participation that did participate in the meeting. And it's the committee's recommendation that we leave the capacity fees as they are, not make any changes.
Okay, so is there anybody from the public that would like to speak to this? Item 5A. Not seeing any. I'm going to close the public participation part of it right now. And then directors, any other comments, questions for Director Hunt? I think it was pretty self-explanatory what he found out.
What basis did you use, Ken?
Well, we felt like it was a very small showing of people who wanted to have that fee disappear, and we felt that it directly impacted their mode of operation as opposed to all of the contractors. That's a fee that they always pass on along if they're building something for another person. If they're building a 16-unit apartment complex, which is their business, and they run that complex, then this is really a kind of an it seemed like it was a favor to them. And we just didn't feel, look at the few amount of capacity fees we have when people come into the town build. It's not much of an impact, really. It's a $4,000 or $5,000 fee that these people, for residents, have to pay. If you're going to be putting in an apartment complex or a strip mall, that's different. You're going to have to pay a lot larger fees. But that was the basis of what we had kicked around and discussed.
Also, we felt that if there would be a can of worms that we would open up if we did decide to do away with capacity fees, about what do we do with people who have paid them and haven't used them and all that stuff. So
Thank
we
you,
felt
Larry,
that there
yes.
was no justification in doing away with the capacity fee.
Well, being in the construction field, it was brought up to me by some of the contractors up here that they would like us to look at it. That's what we did. And I'm sure they won't be happy, but they will be satisfied at least that we took a look at it. So I guess at this point, we're
That's
just
just
going
our
to...
recommendation. I mean, if somebody wanted to...
I don't think we had a motion for anything, so
No.
at this point, unless there's a director that wants to make a motion to get rid of the capacity fees, I think we're just going to drop it at this point. Not seeing any? Item 5A is just going to be dropped. Item 5C, procurement policy. We put that to an ad hoc committee we created. Director Jacobson had some questions about the procurement policy, and then I think you were in charge of that. I think I'd put you in charge of that. So if you want to tell us what you found.
Sure, I think we met and compromised on the wording to, were there a couple of areas of concern, and I still have that concern, and that is that I think we need to make more of an effort to purchase locally and not go down the hill. And that was the reason for my bringing this action item up to begin with. And when we're purchasing, whether it's local or out of town, when it's over a certain amount, I feel that we need to look at competitive bids. And I was told in the Policies and Procedures Manual also states that if it's below $3,000, but above $1,000, that there should be verbal quotes received from various suppliers, and that should be documented. My first comments early on were I'd like to have those forms available, but that does create a lot of extra paperwork and is probably not necessary. So we compromised by saying that the documents should be available if one of us directors were to question an item such as the one I questioned tonight, the tires. I could say, gee, seems to me we keep buying tires from CTW Warehouse. Can I see the bid sheet? I'd like to see that Big O Tires and Les Schwab got a shot at it and that they weren't competitive. So if I feel that I need to see the bid sheet, I can ask for it and it will be provided to me. And I think that's good enough. We don't have to have every bid sheet as part of our board meeting unless we need it. So I asked that be changed, and then in the competitive process overview statement, it said that whenever the total price of a contract or purchase exceeds $3,000, the contract shall be awarded through a competitive bidding or proposal process. It didn't say that it had to be written or verbal, so if that covers verbal, then I felt that $3,000 ought to be amended to say $1,000. That was our recommendation, and at the ad hoc committee, we agreed that was appropriate. So we were asking that section be changed from 3,000 to 1,000. And at the end of that paragraph, we want to add, effort will be made in all purchases for goods or services to source Paradise vendors whenever possible. Now, obviously, that's a Boy Scout thing. You're going to have to agree that that's what you'll do. But the caveat is that, if I see the bid sheet, I ask for it, and I see that we didn't do our due diligence, then at least we can fall back on that and say, shame on you, you need to do a better job. So hopefully that statement and lowering that amount and asking that the quotation sheet be available for review if asked for by a director will be enough to help everybody to remember that we need to try and buy from the ridge and buy competitively before we go down the hill. That's it.
I think, wasn't there some wording that was in here where Director Hunt felt was redundant?
We've changed it all.
We've taken it out. There's
Okay,
no
so-
changes made other than what you see on the screen there.
Okay.
And these, by the way, what Cliff is saying is that these are the items that the ad hoc committee agreed to recommend that the board accept those changes. And once those changes are accepted by the board, then we'll get that stuff.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Is there anybody from the public like to comment on what Director Jacobson just presented? Okay. Deanna, got yours? Not seeing any. I'm going to close the public participation part of the procurement policy. Directors, any other questions, or are we going to have a motion? It looks good to me.
Well,
so
I move we accept the changes as outlined in Director Jacobson's recommendation and as suggested by the committee.
I'll second. I'd like to thank you for letting it go to the ad hoc committee and give it the time to be reverbalized and adjusted. That makes it a lot easier for all of us without the redundant in there. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes with a vote 5-0. Okay, we're going to move on to item 6A, new business, annexation agreements. I understand one of the parties is not here tonight. Is that correct, George?
Yeah, Mr. Pennington sent in a request to put his off till November because he couldn't, or October because he
That was my
couldn't make it
understanding.
tonight.
Okay.
But Mr. James is here.
Mr. James is here. Rob, how you doing? Good, good. You want to come on up? Sure. Manager Barber, you want to kind of refresh our memories on this?
Yeah, I provided you the annexation agreements that were developed with legal counsel's input, and we provided you with a cost estimate sheet that is based on our annexation policy. But I'll remind you, this is a very unique situation because these folks have been out of district, served out of district for many, many years.
Should have been brought
Mr.
in-house a long
James
time
was
ago.
dating back to the 60s, we thought, possibly.
I
70s?
think before that, probably.
Before that. So that, we've been serving them prior to the creation of an annexation fee, the creation of a system capacity fee. We have charged, as long as I've been here approving these or presenting these contracts, a rate higher than our normal customers, to the tune of 10 and 20% for one for service charge and one for usage. So they've paid more than the normal person for many, many years. So the only part of this fee that we have to pay, or he would have to pay, is the LAFCO annexation processing fee. So that $3,900 not only covers LAFCO,
Right there, yeah.
but a big portion of it is a fee that goes to the State Board of Equalization that tracks these things apparently. So the other fees are at the discretion of the board. So unless you have questions for me, I'll turn it back to you.
Director Hunt, I can see it in your eyes.
Well,
Would you like to go first?
I studied this for quite some time and was approached by Joe Pennington a couple of weeks ago. He wanted to sit down with me and explain his point of view. And actually, I'm the one who kind of was feisty several months ago or 2 months ago or whenever it was, and said, well, by golly, why do we keep having these contracts come up? If they aren't in our district, then we're going through a drought. If they aren't in our district, let's not serve them. So make them either come in or get out. And so there it went from that to then a real common sense and slow down and take a look at the propriety of this. I think it is very good to take these people who have been paying money at a higher rate than all the rest of our companies and it's a accumulation of people who ever have owned these lots, right, for whatever time. It could be 50, 60 years in some cases on these things, maybe even longer. But unlike somebody who has come into town and bought a bare piece of ground that paid a minimal amount of taxes for the last 60 years, these guys have been contributing, in my opinion, to the expenses and the health and well-being of PID for all this period of time.
Exactly.
Therefore, I'm really of the line of thinking that we should not charge them all of these things like our water demand mitigation fee, the annexation fee, the service installation fee. Excuse me, not that part. The capacity fee, because I felt like over the course of years they've paid their dues, and that's what we use those for, is to get that buy into the system that people have already paid for many, many years. So yeah, that's kind of the way I'm thinking. We should let them in for the cost-covering aspects of this, of what they need to do. I think it's up to them whether they would have to annex into our district. We would ultimately, I think, have to get an adjustment to our sphere of influence,
Yes.
and that's it as far as PID is concerned. Whether they annex into the city, that's up to them.
In all actuality, they should have been brought into the fold a long time ago.
Well, I'm kind of thinking that way. I don't.
Long before any of us were on this board or boards before us, this should have happened.
I should point out one thing in the middle of this sheet, the annexation deposit. That word comes from the annexation policy that was developed under Ray Auerbach. It's not a deposit that gets subtracted from the total amount of fees. 10% of the estimated annexation fee is what is collected to cover the cost to do for staff work. So we do have money invested with Manassian, relooking at this agreement and making it pertinent to this individual annexation and some staff time. So just keep that in mind that, that the purpose of that fee is to cover the district costs in doing the paperwork necessary to make this happen.
And Mr. James, you're aware of that and comfortable with that number?
What
Yes,
number?
I am.
Okay. Compared to the bottom line, compared to the one at the bottom of the page?
Yes, I completely agree with what's been said here, that the annexation fee wouldn't apply because we've more than paid into the infrastructure, and that's the logic of the annexation fee. And that the water demand mitigation would not be relevant, since we've been getting this water, my
Sure.
wife and I, since '92, and probably going back to the 50s or 60s before that. I wasn't sure about the service initiation fees. We already have a service there, so is that applicable?
That's if you didn't already have.
That's if you didn't already have.
Add a new meter?
If they had to actually
So,
add a new meter, yeah.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have to pay that. Yeah.
George and the board have treated us well, and I would think it would be up to us to cover staff costs. And I've been told about the LAFCO annexation processing fee since this whole process began. So if I cried foul now, I'd be pretty odd. The only thing I might add is that on number 5 in the annexation document, it says it has a maximum annual water demand of 5.56 acres based on one residence, but we actually have 3 residents and a business on that property.
I think that the number is correct, the demand amount is correct, because that was Neil calculating, and I think legal missed
One
the
resident,
fact that it's 4 dwellings and not 1.
I thought you, so.
That's quite a bit of water, 0.56 acre feet.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So the motion would be to have Mr. James pay the $3,900. We're going to annex him in, or sign an annex agreement with them, that he will pay the LAFCO fees and then any staff and legal costs that are incurred.
There will be, if you're inclined to waive the fees, there will be a little bit of changes to this agreement. I'm looking now, there's some sections in here addressing some of those fees. So not extensive additional legal fees, but a little bit.
Well, can we just leave it open-ended as the fees that will be accrued by staff and legal?
Mm-hmm.
That's the motion then.
LAFCO,
I'm,
staff, and legal.
I wasn't gonna. I was looking to make a motion that would set a precedent for him
And
Mr. Pennington.
Pennington.
Do we have anybody else that's on our border we're selling water to that's not in?
He's the only out of district.
Oh,
We've had
good.
those two.
We're to the end
What about the one up?
But we're gonna wait for Joe to come
for him.
for
What
his.
about the
So
one
yeah,
up
we're not
there?
setting precedent unless
I think we should just.
This would be the
the
decision, would
same
this be the
formula.
decision for, or does Joe want to come see us?
Out of respect to Mr. Pennington, you need to hold off because
Okay.
the state
That was my thought.
Well-
Board of Equalization fee is based on acreage, and he's looking at 40 acres, so
Yes,
he
so-
is not looking at $3,900 for annexation process, LAFCO
Which is
fees.
why I left it at Mr. James.
Looking considerably more than that. I can pull it up if you want, which is probably this next one. So he's looking at $8,300.
Do we have a second?
You have a motion?
The motion was
What was the
for
motion?
Mr. James to pay
Well,
the $3,900 for LAFCO.
let's just boil it down. Can we identify from what I said the fees that I want to charge? And we're not going to charge for this all of those aspects of the annexation fee except for our legal efforts here and what LAFCO is going to be charging us.
It's $3,900 plus the actual cost in legal fees and staff.
Staff fees.
Just those fees.
Okay, and that gets us all covered. He's already got his meters. He's already hooked in. We're not going to be putting a water mitigation demand on him for that X amount of dollars. And also, just to make sure, this was my intent anyhow, and I can't seem to find it right now, but maybe it was in reading through the detail. It said in there somewhere that we monitor their usage for the next several years or whatever it is, and if they use too much water or more than this, a half-acre cubic foot per whatever it was, that we're then going to bump their rates up or upsize their meter or do something of that nature.
That comes under the water demand mitigation fee. So the way that works is, in Mr. James' case, it really isn't applicable because he's got 4 dwellings, it's fully developed, there's really no room to add demand there, different on Pennington. But the idea is that if you brought in 5 acres, I mean, you had a single house on it, and then you turned around and split it, then we would
Then
want
we're going to go
another
back and what?
mitigation fee.
That should stay in.
Yes.
Okay.
And that makes sense. Why, if we're going to bring them into the system, why would we penalize them above and beyond what we'd penalize a current
Anybody
customer
for,
for
yes.
using too much water?
Yeah.
It should be the same.
Yeah. You
Well,
you felt that before.
There is a bit of a difference because when we're annexing a property that's not in our boundaries, the basic premise is they need to bring their own water supply. And when they do that by paying this water demand mitigation fee that goes to replace pipes, that actually creates the water that they're going to use. So it is a little different from an annexation versus an in-district customer.
Well, I get that, but if he's got a 3/4 inch meter, it's only going to flow so much water, and if he splits it into 4 parcels, he's going to need more meters to develop them, right?
Yeah.
We have the opportunity to
Then
tack
he'll
it
pay.
on in, so
Then he'll pay. Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Okay, so I just thought of something. This is for Dustin. The person I date, her daughter is one of your 3 parcels there. I don't think there's any conflict of interest because we're dealing with Mr. James, not with a tenant. But do I need to recuse myself from?
Last
I'm
name's
not
not
seeing a
Brentag,
legal
is it?
obligation for you to do that, but you can if you feel uncomfortable.
I don't feel uncomfortable, but I just want to know, is there any?
So I understand she's a
conflict.
tenant. She's not the account holder, right? It's
You're the account holder.
Yes,
I'm
he's
sorry.
owner.
He's the owner.
I'm the owner?
You're the owner of the property.
Yes, but I don't know, who's your daughter?
Well, not my daughter, the girl that I date, Colleen Hodges,
It's one of your tenants.
is one of your tenants.
Oh, yes, Colleen, oh, sure. I know about their first names,
Circle comes
not my
around.
last.
Yes, exactly. So I just need to know since, I don't need to recuse myself because he's the account holder.
no, you're not married. There's no community property interest.
Exactly.
You're not paying.
Just
the
want to
bill.
make sure. Okay,
So do we have the wording?
so
on
that
the
motion died.
Yeah.
Did it?
Nobody seconded.
Well, no one seconded it, so I have to kill my own motion.
So I agree with you, Ken. I think we should do these both at the same time, I don't see where revisiting the other one's gonna.
But out of respect for Mr. Pennington, we probably wanted
He
to hold
asked to
off.
have a delay.
He asked to have a delay till
Well,
November.
the fees that we're waiving, I'm sure he's not gonna object to, and the ones that we're asking to pay wouldn't be any more than the fees that we're asking this gentleman to pay. Why would there be a
Whether-
problem?
I actually have a slightly different concern. If you want to do both, I would suggest putting a time limit on Mr. Pennington's, that he has to accept within a certain amount of time, or
But he's not here to
the
decide.
deal's off. That way, it's not an
But
obligation.
does that blow the
just
deal,
lingering
does that
out
blow the
there.
deal for Mr. James?
Pardon me?
That doesn't affect Mr. James' deal.
I'm hearing this gentleman's ready to sign, so
Exactly.
I don't think that's a concern. I don't
think-
know that that's also the case.
I think since
for-
Joe's planning on being here next month, or in November,
October.
October, okay, October.
I think we ought to wait.
You couldn't make this one.
Okay, so I personally think we should just hold off on Joe's until, since he can't be here, if he has any concerns, he could raise them at that point.
Well,
It's
we'll
gonna
be a
take
lot
us-
better at making the
We'll
motion
have,
next
yeah, I
time.
know, we'll have the grade down, so we'll know what we're gonna do. So I think we should just make the motion for Mr. James right at this point. Since
Okay.
mine died, I'm gonna,
Well, I'll try
leave
to
it up.
stumble
I'll
through
be-
this again. I move we allow the annexation of Mr. James'
James.
properties in, don't you change the page on me.
he's got a motion, he's got a motion.
Oh, there's a motion there? Oh.
Oh, no, there is. no motion.
And we're going to waive the normal expenses that we've done in the past, and what we're going to do in this case is to charge for the LAFCO annexation processing fee and all of the internal legal and staff fees that we have in, and that we will spend in making this process work.
Second.
Okay. Anybody from the public like to speak to item, boy, I lost it now, 6A? Lauren?
I just think George had an excellent idea there. I think we should put a time limit on Mr. James, too, because he's probably ready to sign right now, and I believe he's going to do it. But just for the sake of legality, I think we ought to make it whatever you want, 6 months, a year, 10 years, I don't care. But I think we ought to put a time. That was an excellent idea. Thank you.
That was his.
Well, that was actually Dustin, and that was only in relationship to if we were going to make a dual motion that covered both of them. So, thank you, Lauren.
Well, we do have a hammer here, so at the end of the
Because-
year.
because his contract
out-of-district
expires.
agreement
Yeah,
expires, So there is some.
I think he'll take care of it.
suffice.
I'm pretty sure that Mr. Pennington is going to be here in front of
Same
us.
deadline with Pennington,
So,
just because that's when their contracts.
Actually does state in here, failure through no fault of PID to complete the annexation of owner's property to PID by.
well, why don't we make that after,
Time.
why don't we make that after this motion, since it'll be a separate thing? Or do we want to just add an amendment to it?
There's a
Yeah,
motion.
exactly. So we're either going to amend that motion to include Mr. Pennington, or we are going to just vote on this motion and make a separate motion for Mr. Pennington.
Yeah, I didn't put him in for this one.
Okay. Anybody else from the public like to speak to item 6A? Not seeing any. I'm going to close the public participation part of it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes with a vote 5-0.
Welcome to the family, Mr. James. Bring your
Long-
check.
Been a long time coming. We require cookies every Christmas, so just so you know. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, do we now want to make a motion to put a time on Mr. Pennington?
Well,
You're
Defer
in.
him to old business.
Okay,
Bring it up next month, old business.
And he does have a time limit. He's
Okay.
got to do it by the end of the
yeah, we're going
Motion to turn the AC off.
yeah, I know. So we're going to take item 6A.2, and we're going to defer that to old business for the month of October.
Thank you.
Yeah, October, sorry. Thank you, everyone, on that. Okay. Item 6B, resolutions to call and set date for special recall election. I don't know who wants to lead this one off.
I think we get George to lead it off, either that or the
Or Dustin.
I think I'll turn it
Legal.
right over to Dustin.
Well, you have two forms of resolution, and my apologies, this did not make the agenda packet. Just kind of a tight turnaround with the Candy's Elections Office giving us the certification and then putting together this form. So you see there's some highlights there where we need input from the board and Georgiana with the resolution number.
On the table and the examples back there, the resolution number would be.
Oh, it's on there.
2016.
Oh, I have it. Okay. And then the other highlights relate to the date for setting the special election, which, as you can see, is not less than 88 nor more than 125 days from today. And George, that is December 18th through January 24th, that window of time.
I can express the county staff fully respects that it's your decision, but the later in January, the better for them.
Better for them.
The difference between the two forms of resolution before you came out of a request from, I believe, Director or perhaps even Candy's office suggested it as an option. There's a legal process where you can shift from your standard voting practice. You go to the polling place, or you have a mail-in ballot, depending on the voter's choice, to where it's an all-mail mail-in ballot. So one of the resolutions has that. You're designating an all-mail-in ballot for this special election. This is one of those unique provisions in California law where it makes you frustrated because you can't really tell exactly what is intended. There's some just straight out conflicting provisions, and there's other ambiguity. So I can't definitively tell you what types of strings are attached to if you wanted to exercise this option. On one end of the spectrum, it could be that all of your future elections will be by mail-in ballot, and the next time we have a regular election, which would be November of 2018, there would have to be a special designation on that ballot to the voters, shall we continue with this all mail-in process, yes or no? And then the voters would then have the choice of either continuing or discontinuing the practice. But the emphasis there is kind of you as directors lose control over your elections. It becomes subject to the vote of the people at that time. The other end of the spectrum, and again...
Could I back you up just a minute, because I didn't quite understand that. Are you saying that if we selected an all-mail ballot option now, that we could do that with the vote of the board? Then that would happen in this special election. And should we have another recall that gets started in February, and we get to like August next year, and it passes, and we're going to establish another special recall election, that must be a mail-in ballot. Okay.
That's one end of the spectrum of interpretation, yes.
Okay.
I haven't
So,
presented
yeah,
a different
exactly.
interpretation.
And
okay.
continuing on then, when we get to a regular, normal scheduled election, November of 2018, that is going to be an all mail-in ballot again?
With a yes or no vote of
whether
whether you
they're going
shall
to continue.
But that's the far end of the spectrum.
Yes, so there's another interpretation where you can, this is a one-off. You can do this special election as a mail-in ballot, and then you don't have to do it again. You don't have to put it. And so I think because the statutes, there's no cases interpreting it, there's no assistance in the legislative history, where you land on that spectrum is really just going to be what Butte County Elections says they'll process. We talked with Candy's office. I think why we were asked to look at this as a potential option was the thought that it may save the district some money. They thought that it may save a little bit of money, but she couldn't quantify it, and she didn't think it would be a lot, if anything.
Really? No polling places?
Right.
That doesn't seem sense.
I think it's because, they're same number of folks counting, same number of ink, and pages on the ballot, postage, et cetera, and the cost of opening up polling places, there's not a lot of cost there. There's
really?
volunteers and.
I thought they got paid something.
I'm not the expert on this, so that's why we called them. So, it's presented as an option here, and the resolutions are essentially identical except for that one item.
Would we have to add something to the mail-in one to say that this is a one-time only thing?
We did talk with
It's
Candy's
interpretation.
office about whether she would. I had a question about whether they would even allow an all mail-in ballot for a special election as opposed to a regular election, and they said that they would.
They would. But
Did they have an interpretation on if they would continue, if that would continue on?
it'd be a must continue on.
I did not ask.
Well, personally, I'm interested in getting the opinion of all the people in Paradise, and being that it will be January, to have people come out for a one-item vote is far from unlikely. I understand the mentality of the recall petition committee as to why they did it the way they did it, but I'd like to see an actual true vote of not just 3,000 people that signed something, because there's no guarantees even those 3,000 people would come out to vote, and more likely they're not going to come out to vote in the middle of January for one special item. So I'm sure a percentage of them would, though. But by doing a mail-in ballot, then we might get a little truer sense of the feelings of the people of Paradise. So
I think so. I think we should encourage everybody to vote and make it as easy as possible. So I would recommend we go with the all-mail ballot option. My personal opinion.
Director Kellogg, do you have any comments?
No. Is there any way we can reverse this where it's no is first?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Can you reverse it? It says yes, no. Can you reverse it and say no, yes?
No, that's verbatim from
Verbatim,
how
okay.
the elections.
Just
Thank
trying to-
thank you for correcting the spelling of my name. That will.
I wanted to change them both to no, but I know they couldn't do that either.
Director
So you
Jacobson,
refrain from
do you
making
have
that
any-
one.
Right.
Do you have any comments, Director Jacobson?
No.
Director Duncan?
I agree with you that I think the mailing thing would be better, but I don't want us to get into a box where from then on, everything has to be.
Well, that's one end of the spectrum to one end of the spectrum, and it's hard to say where they're going to land in that spectrum.
Right.
I would
I
assume,
hope this doesn't get back to Candy, but I think they've been pretty lax. I mean, we're not asking them questions and they're going to their code book. They're kind of just saying what seems fair and reasonable. And so my guess would be, if you wanted to switch back to the more typical process, we'll do
For a
this
normal
option
election.
For a special, go back to the typical process for a general election, that they would permit you to do that. And I can't promise that, but
Without
that
a
would be
vote,
my
without
guess.
having to vote on it?
It's probably easier
Right.
than for them.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, because I could see where that could end up costing the district even more money.
Does it actually state that somewhere in the code that if you elect to do all mail-in, that it will be?
I think like you said, it's
mail-in from that point
interpretation.
forward, even for a standard election?
Well, that's where you get into one statute says something along those lines and another statute says the opposite.
That's the gray area the attorneys love.
That's where you need judges to
the judges
Decide which statute's right.
And 2 sets of attorneys, or more than 2 sets, so we can get all in and argue. And
That's like the to Excedrin day, I guess, huh?
Director Hunt, was there anything else you wanted to say right at this point?
no,
Anybody from the public would like to comment on item 6B? Barry?
Barry Bunty from Paradise. I believe that people should be required to go to the polls to exercise their franchise. I think mail-in ballots tend to make it too easy to make mistakes, maybe miscount, maybe have fraudulent activities. I think people, if they want to vote, if they're willing to vote, if they're committed to the project, if they're committed to the issue, they should show up to the polls physically and mark their ballot. That's all I got to say.
I don't think there's enough people out there that actually know the issue out there personally. Maybe if they had a chance to read it. That's the mystery here of whether or not that can happen. It's hard to get them to vote for a president, so I don't know if they'll be so apt to do it for a recall. Dan?
Dan Wentland. I happen to agree with that gentleman. You have a lot of elderly people in the community who are used to a routine of voting. And I think if you try to throw in a wrench somewhere, it might actually mess it up and would probably be less accurate than more accurate. But do keep in mind that a significant number of people in Paradise already get a vote in anyway. A mail-out item anyway. So, but those that aren't accustomed to a mail voting system are used to going to a poll. So I think I agree with this gentleman.
Thank you. Anybody else in the public? Mark?
Just as a point of reference, the Vector Control had a special election recently. That's the most recent one I can remember. And that was a by-mail election. And at the time I was told that it was done that way to save cost to the Vector Control District. Another point to keep in mind is that in Butte County, in our district here for PID, over 60% of the voters already vote by mail. And elderly people tend to skew that even higher because they're oftentimes homebound or don't get out and about much. So anyway.
I look at it as the same reason why we always hear we have the meetings too early, we have the meetings too late, we had them on a Monday, we had it on a Tuesday. There's always something. Maybe this way they'll actually have a chance to think it over, find out the facts, maybe see that some of the details that were presented are not actually fact.
Thank you. Warren Harvey. I'd just like to say it's okay. Speaking on 1 of 10, I'd just like to say it's great if you want to do it by mail. I think the advantages for us, if you're talking about the chess game you were talking about a little bit ago, but I'm not sure that the general public, I'm not sure it's worth the risk of following up the vote in the future to change it to mail-in. But if you want to do it, as 1 of the 10, I think it's great for our side. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Anybody else from the public like to speak to this item? Not seeing any, I'm going to close the public participation part of item 6B on there. Directors, after public comment, is there any other things that we would like to comment on?
I'm curious about one thing. If you have a regular voting, can you also use a mail-in ballot, or is it one or the other?
All mail-in?
You have to sign up for mail-in.
Sign up for mail-in.
In a regular situation, you have to sign up to vote by mail.
So if we left it as a normal, then the people who wanted to mail in are already registered that way and they'd all automatically be able to do that?
No, they have to request.
Apparently 60% of the people in Butte County are.
If you're a permanent absentee or a permanent absentee voter, you could also apply for a one-time by mail if you're going to be in the hospital or something like that.
No, what I'm saying is, typically now, if you're a mail-in, you get your stuff in the mail. and you vote. Is that the way it would be here now if we left it as a standard special election, but left them with both options?
Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Kellogg, anything?
So why don't we,
Oh, my wife likes to vote mail-in because she at times has a hard time getting around. And I like to go to the booth and talk to people and make my vote. And the fellow that works for me actually runs one booth up at my church, and he's a very conservative Republican. And so we have some interesting talks. And I liked a little bit of the talk and stuff. So, but as far as you, I think it's up to you guys to decide. You're the ones that are going to be voted on, so I think that you should make the decision.
Two of us should make a decision, huh?
Well, that is the part that concerns me, actually, Bill. Thank you for bringing that up. That's the exact part that concerns me. There's been enough talk, I think, really, behind closed doors. Okay.
well, remind me again what the early date is and the end cutoff
January
date.
24th would be a
December
Tuesday.
18th through January 24th.
And the 24th is a Tuesday, and Tuesday's a good day. So I think we ought to pick January 24th.
And that's it? We can pick any day in between there? We could pick Christmas Day?
Well, if you pick the mail-in, all-mail ballot option, I would assume you've got to set it on a day that the post office is open.
Yeah.
How about if we don't? Then we could actually have instead, because we always have elections on
There's probably some
Tuesdays,
rule out
right?
there that it would be extended to the
Next
next
day.
non-holiday.
Right.
And if it wasn't, then you're going to be paying overtime and holiday pay for all of those workers.
Oh, yeah.
Your costs just got more.
Okay.
Are you sure that the standard law don't apply in terms of it will be the Tuesday after the first Monday for election day?
Yes.
Go anywhere in there?
Yeah, that's another area of ambiguity, to be honest with you. There's one statute that says your all mail-in elections have to be on these dates, and it's not the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. There's a date in May, there's a date in August, there's a date in September, I believe. But our window doesn't fit in any of those. So then there's another statute that says the same thing, but then it has a clause, or any other date. So, you tell me, which one governs?
Or the other day.
But that's where I come back to, we talked to Candy about that, and she said, no, special election, we could do that.
That's January 24th is a Tuesday. Why don't we just take it?
That's right. And they want us to go as far out as possible. Right. I move we adopt resolution 2016-19 and use the one where it's a mail-in only and set the date for January the 24th, 2017.
I'll second it.
Is that enough?
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think that covers them all.
Yep.
Roll call vote?
Yes.
I'm tempted to pull a Bill Kellogg, but I'm going to do what's best for the district and vote yes.
Larry, you just do that on your own. You don't need to give me credit.
Director Jacobson?
No.
Director Kellogg?
Well, I'll take Cliff's lead and say no, and Seth's going to have to decide.
President Corolla?
Yes. And it passes with a vote 3-2. Director Kellogg and Jacobson being the noes.
That's why I wasn't tempted that much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we're on to item 6D, request for additional personnel. Manager Barber. Pretty much a
Yes,
no-brainer. We're moving along pretty sweet here.
You'll recall that we froze some positions in 2016 to cut costs, and not only was it temporary workers, but we also froze 3 utility workers. And we've been holding our own very well, and my extreme compliments to Keith O'Brien and his staff for keeping things going through this with a very, very limited staff. But now we're at a point where we have 2 of the folks from that group that are on long-term illness situations and won't be returning to work for quite some time. And we had another individual accept employment at South Feather Water and Power. So what was once a 3-person reduction is now 6. So this request is to not really add personnel beyond what our long-term plan was. It's an opportunity to get us 2 people on board of the eventual 4 that would be being hired, so that we can get them through into the training process, on board through the training process, and be productive as soon as we can make that possible. And the other benefit is we're not trying to train 4 individuals all at once come next spring, which makes things a little more difficult when you're trying to train 4. So this request is to give us authorization to move forward with advertising and bringing on 2 utility worker permanent positions. So I'll answer any questions.
This is in the budget, correct?
Yes. Most, yeah. I mean,
in a roundabout
in a roundabout way.
Because we have people that, well, one guy left, he was budgeted for full-time, and another person who is on disability was budgeted full-time.
I move
2 people
approval
are
of
on-
the general manager to hire 2 utility workers permanent positions.
Say there's no budget.
I'll second. Any comment from the public on item 6D, request for additional personnel? Not seeing any, I'm going to close the public participation part of item 6D. Directors, comments, discussion?
Question, you said that we have 2 people on long-term disability? Or-
Yeah, long-term illness issues.
Yeah, illness, okay. And are both of those people permanent, full-time positions?
Yes, they are. And one is on unpaid leave. One is still on paid leave for a little bit longer. The correct answer to Director Duncan's question was there's no budget impact. When you do all the calculation, there's no impact to the budget by bringing these 2 people on a little bit earlier.
Okay, this is a little bit of a out of left field, maybe right field. You said we lost a worker. He quit his job and went to South Feather River Water Company.
They probably pay more down there.
Well, I don't know. I was going to ask, do you know the reason why?
I did not talk to him directly about his reason why. I know he lives in Oroville, so commute will be, was sure part of the decision. And they do pay more, which was probably another part of the decision.
Thank you.
But I did not talk to him directly about that.
Was
Just harassed him about leaving us.
one of these in red here is a utility crew leader. Is that one of the ones that you're eventually replacing, or?
Eventually, when we get to full staffing, that will be
We'll
filled
need it.
by a promotion, which will create a utility worker vacancy of one of the 3 that we've held back.
So I'm assuming you're going to hire a utility worker in the one that looks like you've only got one guy there with no supervisor.
Yeah, I mean,
But he falls
They-
into
they
the
all
other
move
side.
around.
Pallade
They
moves
move
in.
around.
Yeah, Pallade, yeah.
yeah.
So he would, I would assume, become, whoever you hire, he would become their boss, is it?
No, it doesn't work
No?
that way.
They both just-
These people that are utility workers will work for different crew leaders. This is a snapshot just for purposes of an org chart.
Okay.
So it's not like they climb in the same vehicle every day and take
Right.
off together?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
They're not under one person all the time.
I kind of assumed that too.
These all,
Yeah.
These 2 that are on long-term disability, or what are the chances that they're coming back?
I wouldn't want to comment about that
Yeah.
Okay.
personal issue like that.
So, well, one of them that's out is a leader, which would come back and possibly assume that position.
No, the
No,
vacant
that's just a-
utility crew leader is, that's one of the frozen positions.
Oh, okay. All right.
Any other questions, directors?
I have no further questions.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes with a vote 5-0. We're going to take a 5-minute recess at this point. We will reconvene. Actually, we're going to take 6 minutes or 5.5 minutes. We're going to reconvene. We are going to reconvene at a lot farther past at 8:57. We're doing real good. Let's keep this moving. We might make our 10 o'clock schedule. We're going to go on to item new business 6E, cost of service study. Manager Barber.
Well, as I committed to the folks in our customer workshops throughout the year, that we were going to be more proactive at providing cost of service study to the board. So not only do you see it, the public sees it as well. So I completed that exercise based upon the budget that you recently adopted. And at this point, I'm not recommending any change to the 2017 rates, but it gives you an idea of kind of our current rate structure and how it will be looked at in the future. There's some numbers in there, but keep in mind what's really the driver here is when you decide to make a change, it's going to be completely in the board's hands, and that's why I gave you the appendices, so you'll be able to see when you are considering rates the correlation between your per unit consumption charge and your service charge. You ask any person, any of our customers, and they probably will all have a different opinion of whether the service charge should be higher or the unit charge should be higher, and it really depends on how much water they use generally. So you're stuck with that tough task of figuring out what's the best approach for everybody. So I wanted you to see the report, the study, see how it's worked out, calculated, etc., and I'll answer any questions on it.
Can you go back to that last screen, Kevin, for just a second?
The one with the bazillion of rates?
No, there.
This one, the summary just showed how they would fall out under the new budget that you approved if you kept the service charge, the consumption charge the same, the $1.62 in 2017 and $1.61 in 2018. If you made no changes, that's how the rates would fall out.
Okay. If anybody else wants to see the other scales.
They're in our book.
Yeah.
Well, just keep feeding us information like this every year and enough time to act upon it.
That's the
Because
plan.
if we got to stir up another Proposition 218, we need to be doing our stirring 8 months in advance.
I did make a statement, I think it was in the memo, that we'll know more in the next year about our state revolving fund, and this assumes that we're successful with that, which isn't guaranteed. And we'll also learn more about when that payment starts becoming due. So my statement was it's possible to adopt a 2019 rate as long as it didn't exceed the cost that you adopted for your 2018 rate. I didn't confer with Dustin on that, and when we decide to take up that question, I'm sure he'll research that and have his opinion presented to you.
Yeah. I wouldn't be quite so unequivocal.
But I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have to be.
How close are we to the funding program? Approval.
The state revolving fund?
Yeah.
I met with the staff about 3 weeks ago, and from the financial package standpoint, we're about 6 weeks out. The one thing, though, is that there will be no approval of the package until all 4 parts are done. So there's a general package, a technical package, a financial package, and an environmental package. And the one package they say does take the longest is the environmental package. So I think it's all going to be based on when the environmental package is deemed complete, on when that'll be done.
And where we're at with that is we've done all the field studies. The AECOM's done all of them. They've started on a draft environmental document. But they were also in meetings with the state revolving fund folks, and they have their environmental specialist. And so if you remember, we talked about, since these dollars come from the federal government, we don't have to do NEPA, which is the federal equivalent of a CEQA environmental document, but we do have to do what's called a CEQA Plus. So there's some NEPA things that have to be addressed. And one of the things we have to do is we have to get a consultation with federal agencies on the project. And that's what we're waiting on right now. So our AECOM's provided the information to the funding folks. They've sent that off to the federal agencies that need to provide their input. And so we can't do CEQA until we get that input, because we could be have to start over if we guessed wrong what they might say. So we're kind of waiting for that response from the feds. Then we can incorporate their comments into the CEQA document, and we can proceed with that CEQA document. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jim, jump in.
What George just described for the process water recycling project, we still have the SRF for the B-res.
Yeah.
And we are right on the verge, okay, right on the verge, we're talking months for B-res. You all maybe not quite understand the scope yet of B-res, but it's a study, first of all, $500,000, which leads to construction. Process water, SRF is like a year.
Don't say that.
Don't
Yeah.
say that.
We have a lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah.
But, okay, I'll go less,
Thank you.
Yeah.
not more.
A year or less.
I'll say
But
6
right on the
months.
verge right now. we just turned in our federal ID payroll, federal ID employee number.
Fancy.
That means they're actually working on a funding agreement. But there's two SRFs.
One man is
We're
spending
juggling.
money to get reimbursed.
Thank you, Jim.
There's been zero money spent on the B-res.
Right.
There has been money spent on the process water, which we
Exactly.
reimbursed.
Right.
Okay. Anybody from the public that would like to ask a question on the cost of service study, item 6E? Barry?
Just a technical question. We have to go through 218 every year, right?
No.
We don't? We're still good for 2018 and 2019?
Not unless the board,
2018.
not unless the
We've got
staff
rates
and board
approved through
reevaluate.
2018.
For 2018, but not 19?
Correct.
Well,
19's
in one
approved.
respect,
19's
And
approved,
we
it's
got
just the same
rates
as
all the way through 2050.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we don't
Just
make changes.
if you don't make any changes.
Yeah.
So we don't have to go through that process again?
If we don't increase
At least
it, we
not-
don't have to do it. If we don't increase the rates, we don't have to do it to 18.
As they're stated up there.
Correct.
Or if our cost of service goes down.
But we don't have to do it to 18 then.
Yeah.
We can
Well,
take it
we could-
backwards.
You don't have to.
You're
do
not
it to
gonna
18
drop the
if you
rates.
lower it.
You may have a referendum at some point that
I wouldn't.
initiative to roll back rates. If you're charging more than the cost, that's essentially an admission that you're charging more than cost of service.
Exactly.
You could rebuild your reserves. For a short time, you could do something with that money and justify it, but
Right.
you're
And
talking
then-
an
and then
extended
you
period
reduce
of
them.
time.
Reduce.
You become a for-profit entity.
But we don't have to do
Current
a
drought
218 to
depleted
reduce.
But
PID's
if you
previous
decide-
reserves, so according to this, so we could collect our reserves back.
The current
up to
project
where we need to be
depleted
first
our reserves.
Before we would be saying that we're making a profit.
You could also cut your cost of service, lay everybody off. Your cost of service goes down. You wouldn't have to do Prop 218 to lower your rates. You would have to fight the union. You'd probably lose, but That's my opinion.
I think customers wouldn't like it if they didn't get any water.
That's true.
Anyway, these are embedded for 17 and 18.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Anybody else in the public would like to ask a question on item 6E, cost of service study? Not seeing any. I'm going to close the public participation part of this right now. Directors, is there anybody else that has any other questions for George? Ken, are you looking or are you?
No, I'm done.
No?
Sorry.
We're going to close item 6E. Oh, okay.
I do have a comment.
Okay.
On page 103, as for alternatives, identified are Miocene Canal. We looked at a cost study on that, an estimate from 2 different engineering firms, well over $5 million, and it would be used at that time that we explained every 10 years. Inter-eye connection with Cal Water and Chico, $19, $20 million. I know the board hasn't agreed to do either one of those. I'd like to I've been talking for years of getting them off this study. I don't think they have any return on investment, and return on investments is simply saying, how are they going to pay for themselves? So that's my comment.
We don't have the information to make that decision. How they would pay for themselves is Cal Water Chico would be making a payment. And until you have the information to make an intelligent decision, it's a valid source of supply, then you decide whether it's an affordable source of supply.
Well,
and that
we should just take it off. We should just take it off for general purpose.
Pardon?
We should just take it off for general purpose then.
Why?
An uninformed decision is the way we like to go at things. Okay, we're going to go on to item F, survey report on division residency requirement for PID Board of Directors. We had talked about this a couple of months ago, decided to do a little ballot survey, I guess, or a sample ballot, I guess is what we called it. So, who's got the results of this?
They're up there.
They're right there.
I mean, it's...
Who wants to explain the results of it?
Well, I mean, I can explain them. I can't interpret them any more than you can interpret them. That's probably an individual decision. We did our best to get responses. We got some pretty good responses. They're kind of split. They're not overwhelming to change it or keep it the same. They're pretty darn even. So it's completely up to the board what they'd like to do. I'll kick it over to Dustin to give you options and remind you of how this could work.
Well, if you want to move forward, remember that this was kind of a tough discussion as I remember it. Hard to understand. But the key here is if you want to move forward, the really limit here is just your imagination on what you would want special legislation to look like. That special legislation could just give you the power to put a referendum on the ballot that would more formally have a vote on whether to then pursue a change or not. Or kind of, a more kind of to the point special legislation would be empowering PID, the Board of Directors, to make a change with or without voter approval or with or without a voter right to protest in some form. So you see what I mean, how you could really craft the legislation however you'd like it, if that's in fact what you want to pursue. If you don't want to pursue it, then obviously the status quo remains. You need to be a resident voter of your division, and future directors would have that same requirement.
I was really hoping to see some kind of overwhelming sway towards one way or the other. Exactly. This doesn't really tell us anything except for it's just a split decision. And
what percent?
Well, I've got something that will.
Okay, lay it on us.
Well, I think we should pursue legislation
Oh God.
to allow voters to choose whether or not there should be residency requirements. And if that is our legislation, and if it becomes the choice of the people, the public, then that should serve well for what the public's opinion is in 2017 and 18, and in 2025, and in 2050. Because when the public gets tired of one or the other, they can vote it different.
So let me make sure I understand your legislation, Director Hunt. The legislation would allow you to put onto the ballot kind of a majority vote.
Mm-hmm.
If the voters by majority say they want to change the residency requirement, then there would be Section B of this new legislation that then kicks in on how that change takes place.
No, it takes place because the voters voted it.
No, I think what he's saying is
But the voter
legislation says whenever there's an election, there's an opportunity for the people to change how we do it.
Okay, so this is, I'm thinking of
Yes,
in
I
terms
know.
of A, B, and C. And
Okay.
So Section A is PID is authorized to put a referendum type statement on the ballot. And then Part B is then do the voters exercise that right? And it's a majority vote. They can make a change to pure at-large voting system.
Well, my idea was maybe more fanciful. It is that right now we have residency requirements. So we have legislation that says if the people in Paradise want to cause to have an item put on, so it's up to the public, not the board. So if the people in Paradise want to have an item on the for voting, then they have the power to do that. And what it would be is, right now we have residency requirements. So the only reason the public would put something on there is if they want to take the residency requirements away. Let's say that they operate successfully for 15 years that way. And then the public gets irritated about things that are going on, and they say, you know, we have the power to do this. Let's put a referendum back on. Let's get another vote going here, and I want to swing it back the old way. I want to go back to residency
So is it a
requirements.
certain percentage, you need a certain percentage of signatures of registered voters to put something on the ballot?
You guys can work that out. I don't know.
What's the estimated cost in round number?
For my, really, it's not that much. It's hearing what the board wants, which we're kind of starting to get into.
Okay.
And then it's putting it on paper and making sure you're comfortable with it. That's the expense in legal. Then it goes to George primarily, and he's talking with Gallagher or whatever author we want to try to select to push this through, and he may be doing a little lobbying to.
I'm salary, so it doesn't cost you any extra.
Yeah, exactly. I know, really.
I'm on the Aqua State Legislative Committee. That's a cost that PID already incurs along with a number of other of my clients. So I can kind of shepherd it through that. So that's not any new expense. That's something that's not significant either.
And our original concern that you had was of a group, and I know this was more in a racial situation than it is probably our situation here, of, what'd you call it, a...
Trend in the law is everybody is going to division or a ward type of system.
What we have now.
What you have now. And we're going the opposite way.
Exactly.
There's both the Federal Voting Rights Act and the California Voting Rights Act that at some point may come into play. You know, the thought is if you have a population of minorities that are kind of, let's say they're in one division, they're kind of in one neighborhood, then changing to a purely at-large voting system, you could always outvote that minority neighborhood, and you get your all-white male board of directors. Whereas if you had a division system, then theoretically they could elect one of those, because they've got a neighborhood, right? They've got a unit where they have the voting power to put in.
Exactly.
So
we don't really experience that here, so that's...
No, but you're seeing it in the Central Valley. You've you've got these farming communities, Latinos have not been able to get onto boards, and there's actually plaintiff firms that are suing these districts, school districts, water districts, some cities.
Because they were in that large system rather than a
It's
divisional
called
system.
racially polarized voting.
That's what, I
It's-
knew
it's-
polar something, I didn't want to spit it out.
And it's not actually, you don't have to have a malicious intent. It's,
No.
if the effect is that the minority candidates are not able to secure an office, then it's kind of presumed to be in violation of this Voting Rights Act.
Well, I think before we spend any more money or time, then we probably need a legal decision as to whether or not all of this that we would be doing would be in vain and be overridden by just what you mentioned. So unless you give us a green light that it's an option for us to go one way or the other, we shouldn't waste any more time on it.
My thought was, if you want to go the legislation route, it'd probably be a good idea to have an on and off switch, you know, and Director Hunt's, you know, off-ramp, going back to the way things used to be, is maybe not as easy. It would take another, whatever the threshold is to get it on the ballot, it would take another one of those to get it back on the ballot, and then obviously a successful choice. Whereas I was kind of thinking more along the lines of 218. The board kind of does it, subject to some kind of protest option. But again, there's really a lot of creativity you could put into something like this.
On a local level, if we're looking at that we're in the club and the club is voting how we want to do things. So if the vote affects all the people that are serviced by our water, and it's collectively they decide to go one way or the other, then unless state or federal interferes with that, then that's the way it should be. And if it changes 10 years from now and they decide they want to go a different way, then unless state or federal says we can't do that, then that's the vote of our people at a local level doing what's best for us. So unless there's a legal reason why we can't do that or shouldn't do that, that's why we have you.
It's
And I
not
would
an
say
issue
that-
of whether you can or you can't. It's just a risk.
What would happen if we said that, well, there was a majority here, 250 over 220, that want the change, so let's go ahead and do it? What would happen at the local level when the election came around and the elections office in Oroville put the ballot together? Would they honor that, or would they say it's not valid?
Well, it's us we'd be
Well, I mean,
starting creating the
but they're gonna
legislation.
put your name, we have to go by state. We're not like town council, we gotta go by.
You need,
But we're not making the
in my
decision.
view, you need legislation
Yeah,
to
we're not making
put
the
the
decision.
issue on the ballot. That's kind of step one.
Or if I follow what you're saying, you could say we took a vote, it said change it.
Yes.
You could direct us to draft legislation that changes it
Yes.
and never,
Not ask them, just do
Doesn't
it.
ask
What would
anybody.
happen?
Yeah.
yep, you could do that.
So,
I think you,
470 is an awfully small sample group.
I mean, what we're,
5%?
there's two ways you can look at that. It is a majority. On the other hand, if the recall took 3,000 some odd signatures because of the amount of service, then maybe we ought to look at that as the guiding. If you want to change that, then maybe we ought to have enough people
well,
that sign on to making that a votable event.
remember, we need, you need legislation that stands a chance of getting through the legislature. I think if you come kind of with kind of a heavy-handed, if the board by a majority vote decides to do this, then it shall be done type legislation, that I suspect will, Gallagher or whoever our author is would have a difficult time persuading his colleagues that that's a good piece of legislation to move forward. Whereas if you have some customer involvement, either through a vote or through an opportunity to object, then, I'm guessing here, but I think that would stand a better chance of getting through the legislative process.
Has there been a special legislation doing this before?
Yes, yeah.
Could we get
There's a lot of different examples. Richvale Irrigation District, they've got special legislation that allows them to become a landowner voting district rather than a resident voting district.
Is there division?
Nope.
You have to be a landowner in order to be on the board?
Yep. Or a landowner representative.
I would say that having it this way ties the PID board's hands and gives the public less of an opportunity to select the appropriate people that they think are qualified to take care of business for them by having the districts, the divisions. And I would think getting rid of those would give every person who is in this system an opportunity where you might have somebody qualified as heck sitting there, but their division's not up for election for a few years, and so they suffer the consequences.
I would also like to make a point that the way our system is right now, we are at risk for that violation you talk about, the minority.
The way it is now?
Yes.
Why?
It's real easy. Let's take Division 1. That's where I am. There's a black guy who lives in Division 1. He registers to run for the seat.
Okay.
I'm a white guy. I register to run. And let's say that there's a rather large community of black guys in Division 1. They're not, I don't think, but let's say that there is.
Then guess what?
Everybody in Paradise votes for Division 1.
Guess what? Now you know what it feels like. To be the minority.
But the bottom line is that minority person would still not have a fair shake of getting on. If it was just the people in Division 1.
That's not where the precedent's been set. The precedent's been set the other way of this racial polarization.
No, but
It's exactly the way I'm saying it.
Yeah.
I think in the case of racial polarization, only the people in the division vote for the person to represent them. not
From that
everybody.
division. And we don't do that.
But that may be a remedy. Yeah, you're right. If there's ever a future where that becomes an issue and the judge rules against us, that may be a remedy. You shall change your voting.
And
to this.
that is why I started 2 years ago to say we shouldn't have any divisions.
Yeah.
Everybody votes for them. Any person can live anywhere. In the future, in 50 years, if it becomes a problem, then they fix it. It's not a problem. Hasn't been for the last 100 years. How much more time do we have?
What if there's a lawsuit? And you know, you'd like to settle that lawsuit. You'd like to get out from under it, but you've got some very difficult procedure in place through legislation to change your voting process. That's actually a reality in some of these local agencies.
Well, I don't want it the way I suggested earlier. I'm just trying to find a way to make it happen so that this could work out. The way I would like it is it's just one all open, nothing. We put that into legislation and make it happen with no escape valve. And then if it needs to be escaped, then they have to go back to legislation.
Yeah, maybe to move things along here, if we can get a sense from the board, are you interested in pursuing special legislation? That's question number one. And if so, then maybe George can reach out to whomever your preferred author is. Start with Gallagher maybe, or somebody else, whoever you prefer. And we speak to the author about the issues, and maybe they come up with
Some guidance.
Yeah, and then we kind of put that on paper and we bring it back to you.
Can I ask a couple of questions then, Justin? One, you said there were some other districts that were either anticipating doing that or had already done that to some level. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. How successful have they been so far?
It's hit or miss. You know, many have been successful. If you were to open the Irrigation District Act, you would see a whole bunch of different special pieces of legislation that are unique to the various irrigation districts.
So
I just
they have-
mentioned one, Richvale.
So they have perfected that then? They've gotten rid of the
No,
divisions?
well, yeah, in many cases they have, or they've addressed other little issues, like there was one bill that went through the legislature last session. It was Tulare Lake Irrigation District, I think. I forwarded it to you, I believe. In any event, it was something like the director can live within 2 miles of the division or the district boundaries. So they must have had some problem where the director moved out and wanted to still be on the board, and he didn't reside within the district boundaries. So there's all kinds of different bills like that.
But I'm just wondering if it wouldn't behoove us to wait and let somebody else spend their money perfecting that, and then we can just jump on the bandwagon as well. I mean, what's the rush? If other people are paying to push legislation through to make this a standard,
But they're
then-
paying for themselves.
Yeah, but once
unique to their irrigation district.
But once there's a precedence, then it seems like it would be a lot easier for us to say, me too.
They are presidents already.
Bill, you had a question?
No, just comments. Richvale Irrigation District doesn't have anybody living in it anymore. Richvale, the town itself, has not grown. It's just there. I have lunch there every once in a while. Most of the growers that farm there, some of them live in Paradise, some of them live in Chico, and some of them on the water board are in those different communities, because there's nobody or hardly any population inside the district anymore. The manager, I think, lives in Ridley and so forth. So they live in surrounding towns, and to make their district function, they had to get this done that way.
So they have presidents.
Where they'd have a board. And then Tule Lake is an interesting thing. It's been water fights now for 10 years up there over fishing, taking dams out and changing all sorts of things. But they have the same situation as our rural population. The people that really live on the farms where they work goes down. They live in towns around it. They don't, and that would be probably the same reason they put a 2-mile limit out to catch enough people to do it. And interestingly enough, in the middle of the Sacramento Valley, there's an area where there's no zip code because there's nobody there that lives there. Maybe a few hunting clubs, but there's no residents year-round. It's vacant. But it's all farm.
Well, in the interest of getting things done before 10 o'clock, let's move forward with something.
I'm thinking of the district. I think that doing it the way the town does is better for the district and for the customers. That's why I don't like the divisions. But
So there's our role model, the town.
yeah, the town does. Now the other thing is, Chico is talking about going the other way.
Going into
With
divisions.
Yeah. So and he said the trend is division. Yeah. I don't know. I just think it's the thing. To me, if you have divisions, you should only be able to vote in your division. But that isn't the way it's
I
set
think
up.
that just stifles it even more.
Well, it likely also increases the cost of your election.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, I can't speak for everybody else on the board, but I don't like the divisions. If there's an economical way to do away with them.
Well, the economical way is it's only going to cost several $1,000s to champion special legislation that would absolve the division residency requirement. That is what I wanted 2 years ago. It's what I wanted last year. It's what I wanted in August. It's what I want now.
Make a motion.
So I move that we approve the expenses necessary to see if we can go get legal to do their portion of it, then give it to George and champion it, see if Gallagher will take it on. And if they take it on into special legislation and it comes back and gives us, it changes that.
Can I make a recommendation before
You
anyone
might want the
seconds
shorter
that?
version of a motion?
Shorter version of your motion.
I make a
You
recommendation.
short.
Dustin doesn't know what we're going forward with, and I don't. So my suggestion, there's enough interest in pursuing this. So my recommendation is you create an ad hoc committee. I will head out to Gallagher's and get their input on what works, what for them, what they can sell, etc. Bring it back to a committee, and then that committee can bring it to the board so you can give us real direction on how to proceed. That's just.
So Ken wants, you want no divisions.
You know what they want.
You want no divisions. You want no divisions.
That looks like a.
Bill, you
ad
like
hoc committee
divisions.
Right there.
Yeah, I'd like it to stay the way it is.
You like divisions on there? Okay, so I'm going to create an ad hoc committee with Director Hunt and Director Kellogg on it to get this moving forward. I'm going to have one from each of you.
I've got enough committees.
I need you on this one because, see,
He does, here, right next to you, he hasn't got a
Except
committee.
not like.
I need one from each point of view.
Write that down.
One from each point of view on there.
That
I
doesn't
don't
help-
imagine this is going to require
That
too
doesn't
many.
help clarify anything.
Yeah, because then we aren't going to have a
You got
committee
two people
consider.
that
Okay.
at least are-
Director Jacobson, Director Hunt, would that be
Thank you.
acceptable? Or Director Duncan and Director Hunt?
Jacobson needs to be on something.
Are you willing to take that on?
On,
Ad hoc committee?
on which,
On-
Working this thing out.
On working this thing out and getting a draft of something to give to George so that he can go see if someone wants to champion the
Well,
legislation.
George is going to go see Gallagher first.
Well,
Bring back ideas to
we
the
worked
committee.
so well on the last committee, I'll accept that.
We work it up and bring it to the board.
The ad hoc committee is so formed. The item F
Thank you,
is
Cliff.
tabled.
I just said
Until so time.
thank you, Cliff. What's that?
The item F is tabled
Until
until
come back.
it comes back
Did
from
you
the ad hoc
create
committee.
the ad hoc
reports
committee?
back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Who's the
Director
boss?
Sons, you caught that, Georgina?
Who's the chair?
You can
You're
arm-
the chair.
arm
You gave
wrestle,
him the last one,
whatever.
give him this one.
Okay.
Make him do it. Take the notes and report.
I did it last time. It's your
Director
turn.
Hunt is the chairperson on the ad hoc committee. Director Hunt and Director Jacobson. Director Hunt.
I thought it was smart to try.
And we're going to table it until the ad hoc committee brings it back. Item 6G, Botanical Garden, Director Hunt. Magalia Botanical Gardens.
Yes, well,
A lot happening there.
I wrote a lot of words. I think it's easy to understand. I was a little taken aback that Bill took it upon himself to declare an ad hoc meeting while he was riding in a vehicle outside of the district boundaries, and conducted a meeting with Mike there. So anyhow, what do we need? You know, the last ad hoc committee meeting I was involved in was with Cliff. We met, I don't remember, one day last week. Was it last week? I think it was last week.
Friday.
And we had a public participation in it.
We did.
So ad hoc committees are not immune from public participation. And we set it up, we had a date, we communicated amongst the directors and staff and whoever else in the district wants to know when we set meetings. Well, why not? Why should we not have that for the Botanical Garden Committee? The public should be able to participate in that if they want. And the definition of an ad hoc committee is that it is of limited duration for a specific item. Well, we've been having this ad hoc committee for 5 or 6 years, it seems like. Maybe only 3 or 4, but still a long time, and it doesn't look like it's going to go away. So why don't we just my fix is leave Bill on the committee, just add somebody else to it, and make it a standing committee, subject to notice and the place where the meeting's going to be held, and let public know, and they can show up.
I didn't even know we had an ad hoc committee.
Yeah, for the Botanical Gardens.
Yeah. So
I'll make a motion to change the Magalia Botanical Garden ad hoc committee to a standing committee.
I wanted to add something before you do it. The actual name is Lakeview Botanical Gardens. The actual...
Magalia Lakeview Botanical Garden.
No Magalia, Lakeview Botanical Gardens, because it's also going to be
Lakeview Botanical Garden.
It's a park. It's Lakeview Park.
Changed from an ad hoc committee to a standing committee.
No, you already changed it to a standing committee about a year ago.
no.
No.
Look at the list of committees.
Okay, but at any rate, the proper name is Lakeview. The board who's actually in control of it.
I need a second.
Well,
Anybody?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Bill. Now that I got a second.
Okay. The board that's actually in charge of this is the
Paradise Parks and Recreation.
Parks, no, it's Paradise Recreation and Park.
Recreation Park.
Recreation Park. In charge of it And I'd gone to other meetings with Mike, which resulted in nothing happening, and never reported them because there wasn't anything to report. I've walked this area many times to see how the progress is and what's going on. And so I thought it was very appropriate because nobody had showed any interest. In other words, when I did give the report, the only interest I see is complaints, but it actually is good because the Botanical Garden maybe at least will get the right name. And you've shown some interest, which is great. The public can be aware that this exists even, because I think it's fallen out of their sights. And the idea of what Mike and I agreed to was simply, with his supervision, to start a public thing to invite people from the public to participate in, to get a club going or something else, because there's no money in the Recreation District's budget, and it's not part of our budget, to get volunteers to help design and start putting in plants and little signs and a hiking trail if we don't get the road in, and open it up more to the public, just what you want, Ken. You want public input. Right now, there isn't much to show anybody if they walk into it, and nothing much is going on because there's no money for it. So, to me, I don't think it has to, you make it into a committee, I don't know, and do that. That's, if you want to, fine, but this to me is like somebody got the teapot too hot and it started boiling, and you had to have something to complain about.
Well, do we have rules or do we not have rules? Maybe I'm wrong. Can we have I know that we can't convene a board meeting outside of our district limits. Can we convene a committee meeting outside of our district limits?
You know, I thought of that and I should have looked at it. My recollection, which may be wrong, but my recollection is the general rule is you must conduct Brown Act meetings inside your district boundaries. So that's any regular special board meeting or any standing committee meeting.
Mm-hmm.
There are exceptions to that rule, and I don't know. On occasion you go to a site visit or whatever.
That's what I was going to say. If it was something where that was in relationship to the.
So there are exceptions, and they may apply in this instance. I don't know. I just didn't brush up on those, and I actually don't know the circumstances under which why you were in a car with Mike out of the district. But
okay, I'll explain two things. We never left, as far as I'm concerned, the boundaries of the Recreation and Park District.
I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about Paradise
I don't
Irrigation
interrupt you.
District.
Please don't interrupt me.
Okay.
So when we went, and most of the time we talked about the Concal new park that he's building, and I looked at grasses for him and gave him advice on that. And then as we came back, I brought up the Lakeview Botanical Gardens and how we can possibly get some community interest, and how over in Fort Bragg it started the same way with a small club and the community supporting it, of people, gardeners and what have you. And I brought it up to Mike before, and he's always said, put it off. So that's what I did.
So was this a meeting you were paid for?
Yes, he put in for pay for it.
You were
And then as I came back, and so I put in for a committee meeting because something was decided, and came to the board and told you exactly what I'd done, where I'd gone, and so forth, and put in for my big $100, and actually had a committee meeting of sorts that where the principal district involved and the manager made the decision. It wasn't a thing that was going to be brought up, I didn't think, to the public for anything, because it was actually Mike acting as a manager of his district.
But the
comment-
Concal Park was talked about.
Well, my comment to that is, it sounds like that if Bill thinks it's something that doesn't need to be brought up to the public, then it's okay for him to do it without giving the public an opportunity to participate. Anyhow, the question is it legal outside of the Paradise Irrigation District's borders? But I don't even really care. It's water under the bridge. I just want to fix it. We turn it into a standing committee. Add one more, you got to pick somebody, not me, to be on the
Oh, I see
committee.
Directors Hunt.
Not me.
Director Hunt's name
And,
all over this.
And then it becomes a standing committee, and we go by the Brown Act, and we be nice boys. So what you're really telling me is that we can do an ad hoc committee meeting at Pebble Beach on the golf links?
Yeah, well, remember, an ad hoc meeting is not subject to the Brown Act.
I know.
There's very, limited, it's a limited committee, specific purpose.
Oh, I got a specific purpose for
Yeah,
it.
I know. I think I suspect what that is.
Jeez.
Okay, anybody from the public like to comment on the motion and the second that we have? Changing the ad hoc committee to a standing committee. Not seeing anybody from the public wants to comment on it. I'm going to close the public participation of it. Directors, one more chance. Anybody has discussion on it? Anything else they'd like to say?
It's not a big deal. Let's
We're
vote
going
and
to end
go.
this. We're going to end this item G quickly. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No?
Pass it with the vote 4-0. Or, excuse me,
4-1.
4-1. I'm sorry. Director Kellogg being no vote.
Now, Mr. President, populate it.
Okay, and I'm going to add Director Duncan to it.
Me? No, you got a good cliff on
Okay,
that.
I'm going to put Director Jacobson on it.
Good.
Just a test.
We need some work.
Well, and you need to walk. I know you limped in tonight, your feet were bothering you.
Director Jacobson,
So you and I are on this ad hoc committee?
No, it's
standing committee now.
Oh, it's a standing committee now.
Magalia Botanical Garden.
Long term.
Okay, meeting duration time. We're coming up on that. We're going to pass over that. Board recess, already done that. Let's move, boys. We can get this done. Committee reports. Any of these that are an absolute necessary, or anybody want to pass on this so that we can make our time schedule? I'd like to get to the manager's report and staff and billing and treasurer. So.
Well, I can handle the finance committee real fast.
Larry, anything important?
Nothing important. We're doing our regular meetings, and we're mainly doing annexation of Chico and Oroville.
Okay, finance committee.
We're moving forward with the establishment of reserves, the accounts, how much we're going to populate them with. We're going to get another cut back from Kevin. We're going to meet again, and we'll be presenting that in the October board meeting. So we're making progress.
Thank you, Director Hunt. Landscape subcommittee, Director Kellogg.
They're going to be meeting again and reporting to the Water Conservation Committee. Both the Water Conservation Committee and the Paradise Lake Recreation Committee, which you have minutes of, they need some corrections and review by the committees before they come back to the board. There's some minor errors in them, and I didn't take the time to go through it, but they're there. And so we bring them back to the next board meeting after the committees. Well, one committee won't meet for another 2 months, but after they meet again, then we'll bring it back to the board.
Okay, thank you. Water Conservation Committee, Director Kellogg.
Same thing there.
Okay. Paradise Lake Recreation Committee.
Same thing.
Director Kellogg.
Same thing. We'll bring it back to after the committee looks at it.
Yep. Butte County Special Districts. Director Hunt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was your name.
Yeah, I know. I got all kinds. No, I got it. Okay, yeah, we met yesterday. We had conversation once again about whether we should be alive or not, or just disband it. But one of the
Night, Dan.
It looks like one of the ways that we're going to go is with our next membership package that goes out, the bill at the end of the year that says here's your invoice for the whopping $35 or whatever it is. We're going to tell them that they either have to that they must provide the liability policy showing that if that board member is involved in special districts functions, that their local district covers their liability insurance for that duration of that function. And if they do not bring that in, we've been trying to get it for over a year, then they're not going to be allowed to rejoin. And if this group moves from 35 people down to 10, so be it, because we can't move on with the special districts without having that insurance. Our next meeting is going to be in November. And it looks like we're going to hold our semi-annual general meeting in late January, probably on the 24th.
The day of the election.
Actually, that's correct.
I know. And that was it. We did have speaker from the legislative arm of special districts, and it was nice. And that was it.
Thank you, Director Hunt, and all the directors for those quick committee reports. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment on the committee reports, either items 1 through 6? Not seeing any. We're going to move forward from the public participation part of this and move on to the general manager's report, item 10.
You have my written report. Only thing I have, and I'll answer questions, the only thing I have to add, and I alluded to it before, the drinking water fee structure change has been approved by the state. I'm not sure, it's going to the Office of Administrative Law, but it's looking for us, it's about our fees going from $18,000 a year to $40,000 a year.
Wow. That's what we talked about earlier.
Aqua worked hard to pare that down, but it's still a pretty big
That's the spared down number?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay. Speaking of drinking water, how many of the schools bought the drinking fountains?
Well, we're only working with
The intermediate?
the intermediate right now.
But you
Okay,
do
so none
have
of-
two.
I forgot to ask Jim, we put in the order for you, and I haven't found out if we got the pricing or whatever. I'll have to get back to Cliff on that.
Okay.
Popped in my head today, and then I never got a hold of Jim.
I'm interested to know if the high school and the elementary had
Well,
joined in.
Melissa and I are gonna buy 2 for the high school,
Mm-hmm.
and we're hoping to get the same deal on those 2 as what they
Yeah,
got.
exactly, the one that
Yeah.
buy one, get one free. or
Either way,
whatever.
we're gonna do it, but it'd be kinda nice if we pay less for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you, and Melissa, for doing that. Any questions for General Manager? Any points?
I have a comment to bring up.
Okay.
It's real quick. iPad page 136, the Paradise Reservoir elevation graph. How many of you know that every year the current year line is red?
Red. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah? What do the other colors change each year?
I don't care, but it's easy to see, and the previous year always gets changed to yellow. And it is a hell of an idea because that always stands out. Those are the easiest colors to see there. And funny thing is, it's been that way for 4 years. Yesterday, driving down there in the truck, I made a recommendation to George that he keeps the red line and just keeps it every year for the current year.
Exactly.
And he tells me he's been doing it for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So good job, George.
They're right on the mark there. I was waiting for a typo on here. I thought, where have you found a typo on this page? There isn't that many words.
I thought maybe that red meant it was going over the top and we were losing water.
Yeah, well, when it flattens out up there at the very top, we are spilling at that point. Okay, anybody else have any questions for the General Manager's report or comments? Anybody from the public have any questions for the General Manager's report? Not seeing any, I'm going to close the public. Oh, I thought you were moving for a second, Lorraine. Public participation part of that. As an information item only, we're going to move on to item 11, legal report.
I'll try to be brief. Just 2 items. One, to emphasize something that George wrote about in his GM report. We're transitioning from these temporary urban conservation regulations, mandates, into a permanent approach. It's not looking good thus far, and I'm thinking, unfortunately, I've been so busy with water fix and other matters, I haven't really been able to focus on this a lot.
And I've been involved in a committee of Aqua, and if I wasn't clear in my memo, this is one of those times where Aqua's bowing to a state position probably a lot more than we would want them to.
So just as a brief example, looks like Aqua and the state are kind of aligned that the indoor use standard ought to be 55 gallons per person per day. George tells me that in February we're closer to 100, so we got a lot of room to hit that mandate. And then there's another tier of regulation that deals with outdoor water use. I think it's a big deal, and we're going to be in for a big fight at the legislature. Maybe Aqua won't even be supportive of us. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. That's, for us, that's a significant.
Is there a reason why we use more water indoors in February than we would in July?
No, February is
just
just
a
a good
standard.
indication that it's almost exclusively all indoor.
Oh, okay.
Somebody's watering.
Okay,
the lawn.
so if it's happening in February, it's
Yeah.
happening in every other month?
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you. That clarifies it.
Can I make a comment here? Because this is something that I did want to talk about. On the Aqua's proposed rating, that 55 gallons per capita, I thought that was rather odd number, because I went and checked, and the average for most households using average water is 80 to 100 gallons.
Yes.
Yes.
And, but as I was looking at Aqua, that ruling is talking about a 20% reduction by 2020. And there's not going to be any way that someone can discriminate between what you're using inside or outside. So it just seems like it's kind of like a fear thing to keep throwing out 55 gallons. I saw that nowhere in Aqua. I just saw the 20%.
Yeah, and the 55 is in the legislation through the discussion. So it's not on there.
How would they even, I mean, what would be the logical concept of even being able to do that?
And that's their goal, and that's where they're heading to. And if more recent legislation that they're pushing even harder through this, they want to have a meter for your outdoor and your indoor use.
Cool, Big Brother.
That's how they'd like to control how much you're using.
Where is this written? Because I was reading through their basic tenets on this, and they said nothing about
The 55?
the 55.
It came through the discussion in the committee that I was,
Okay, so
yeah.
it's just something they're talking about. Right now, it's 20% by 2020.
No, what they're talking about is more than that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the 20% by 2020 was approved back in 09, and now they don't think that's enough. So these new things they're talking about are going to go deeper than that.
They're going for 45 or 50%.
It's, yeah.
Oh.
If I can find something, I'll send it to you. I'll get it to you.
And you'll find there's not a lot of stuff that comes out of the state that makes sense when in relationships to water. A lot of it is very skewed.
Unless there's additional discussion on that, the other item I wanted to touch upon was this. You've probably seen it in the news, the Water Quality Control Plan update. The San Joaquin River and tributaries are phase 1 of that proceeding. They had a significant release, the Water Board did last week. And you'll remember our concern is an unimpaired flow standard. San Joaquin River's phase 1, Sacramento River and its tributaries, which is us, is phase 2, and then phase 3 is a water right proceeding. So their phase 1 report for the San Joaquin and tribs was a 30 to 50% unimpaired flow standard from February through June, with the staffed preferred option being 40%. So you can just imagine something like that in with our reservoirs. You're passing 40% of your inflow from February through June. That would devastate our water
Wipe
supply.
it out.
So this is another big deal that probably in 2018 will be a significant item, of my attention.
2017?
I think it's more like 18.
Yeah.
I think water fix is 17, and 18 is phase 2. But, Governor Brown also sent out a letter yesterday. It was kind of I don't know. The letter basically said, encourage the Water Board to act more quickly on phase 2. But also at the same time, the governor would sure like to see voluntary agreements to create more in-stream flow and to address some of the water quality issues, environmental issues in the Delta. So it's kind of like trying to put the water user community into a corner here, where they feel like they're being rushed to do something as part of, in anticipation of this phase 2, or you could do this voluntary agreement. So I thought, it's an orchestrated water board, a very concerted media strategy, and then Governor Brown's letter. It's obviously that this is very important to the state. So
Didn't they have a setback in that when they couldn't justify the cost for the amount of water they were going to receive downstream?
Are you referring to the tunnel project?
Which is...
This is something different.
Yeah, but this is all kind of...
There are interrelationships, absolutely.
Yeah.
Bill?
I'd like to comment on the San Joaquin River. It's called a river. Up here, we'd call it a creek. And it's not a very big source. When I went down and visited the wetlands last year, we drove out to the river, and you could walk across it in about 20 feet, shallow water. And that was after all the diversions off of it and what was revs. And they had problems with salt and that. And a lot of that wetlands was just working with salts. But then you go down the river farther, and I don't know exactly where it's at, but the river has subsided 15 or 20 feet, I understand. And it's basically dry there, because when they finally get enough water to flow down there, they're going to create a lake, because it won't go beyond that area until they raise the water up. They're really fighting over a little bit of water, and if you wonder why they come up here and look around so hungrily, they'd look at Butte Creek and say, you have a river there. And they just can't believe the water resources we have up here. So I think we need just to fight to keep them from being too greedy, and like the tunnels deal. But they really are short of water, and they have to change their habits. A lot of orchards died in the drought down there. No water, wells or otherwise.
Any other questions for legal? I don't know if I asked this on this one. Public, any questions on the legal report? Not seeing any. I'm going to move past the public participation part. It was an information item only. Directors, we good? We're 2 minutes. Is that what it's reading?
1 minute.
Okay, you got a choice. Staff and billing reports or treasurer's report? What would you rather have?
Treasurer.
Director's comments. But if I don't get a choice, I'll make a motion that we extend the meeting for 10 minutes.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
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 No.
Okay, passes with a vote 4-0. Director Kellogg being, 4-1. I keep saying 0.
I think you had it right the first time, Seth.
You know, I can actually see the clock tonight. It's reflected in the glass up there. I can't see it over there. I would suggest we put the clock over
Okay.
here where everybody can see it.
With 10 minutes, we've got enough time for probably maybe 2 of these things. We're not going to have probably time for all 4.
Treasurer report.
I move we accept the report as presented.
Was there anything that stood out? Was there anything that stood out? I read it. There was nothing that stood out. But is there something that... Is there anything specific that you want to bring up?
No.
Directors, any questions that you have for the treasurer's report? Anybody from the public have anything they would like to address on the treasurer's report? Are we doing the treasurer's or staff and billing? We're doing the treasurer's, right? Okay. Not seeing any, I'm going to close the public participation part. There's been a motion, was it seconded?
Director Kellogg had a comment.
Director Kellogg?
Oh, well, thank you. Somebody recognized me tonight. I've been having a lot of fun lately. I got in so much trouble with comments. It just was interesting. Financing application state revolving fund in progress, reserving policy in progress, long-term capital plan in progress, audit field work scheduled for September. Well, we're in the middle of September. Any rate. Oh, who are you pointing at?
They're in there now.
They're what?
They're auditing
Here this
people are
week.
in there.
Oh, are the auditors here? I didn't
Oh,
know
yeah.
that. Okay, well,
I was called in the other day.
oh, you were called in? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Told them all this thing.
Oh, everything's fine.
Where the pot of gold is?
I told them where we were
Yeah,
hiding money.
yeah, okay.
Okay, that's my only comment.
Okay. All in favor of accepting the treasurer's report as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Okay, staff and billing report.
I don't have any questions.
Me neither.
Go back to the tow truck there. That's got to have a good story.
Oh, that one? No.
That alone warrants just,
Well,
In the truck going in the lake?
the gentleman and his wife finished canoeing, and pulled up parallel to the lake to go collect his canoe.
Did you say the gentleman and his wife were canoodling?
Canoeing.
Oh, excuse me. My misunderstanding.
there must have been a typo somewhere there,
Hearing
huh,
aids.
Ken?
He jumped out of his truck to go collect his canoe, and he left it drive. So it turned its way into the lake and ended up where you saw it. I would like to commend staff for a very good response. Off hours, we had divers secured to assist the tow truck driver. We had Fish and Game out there providing their input. We could have had a little faster response maybe with some of our oil pillows, but all in all, it was a very well-handled incident.
How did the CHP get involved?
I want to add
Not
one
in
thing.
They're in
Paradise District.
They respond to stuff in the county.
Oh, okay.
Robin Huffman was there in a kayak, and she took a video of the incident, and she thought we should have a better paper supply to soap up the oil with. And in the report somewhere, I think Jim was putting that they should have had the little lake boat out there with some other material to help soap up what is. I was there the next day, and all you could see was a light sheen on the water. No dead fish, no problems with anything. And it was so far from where the water would go down to quite a ways from the dam. So.
And there was zinc in the oil, so that probably helped.
Zinc in the oil.
So the truck didn't corrode?
But I thought
And thank you to Robin. She was kayaking, and she did assist pushing some oil pillows around to help collect some of the oil.
Okay. Right. Okay. Any other questions of the staff and billing report? I'll entertain a motion.
I move we accept the staff and billing reports as presented.
Does the public have any comments or questions on the staff and billing report? Not seeing any, I'm going to close the public participation part of the staff and billing report. All in favor of accepting as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Okay, director's comments. Director Kellogg.
Let me think for a minute.
Director Hunt.
Yes. Director Kellogg made a comment about committee reports that he's going to be presenting for Landscape Subcommittee, Water Conservation Committee, Paradise Lake Recreation Committee. There are minutes typed up and where they were included in our board packet for the first time ever. And I would like to make a comment that I don't think that that's appropriate. I don't want to see their minutes. I don't want to hear whether they're correct or not correct. I don't want to listen to Bill merely reading the minutes of their various committee meetings. I don't care if there are errors. I don't care whether the reports are complete. The committee should be coming back to the board with action item recommendations for which the board needs to approve. Don't bore the board members.
don't bore board.
Don't bore the board members with all this trivial detail. It doesn't mean anything to us. If you have an assignment that was given to you by the board, then report on that. If there's something you want to bring to the board for action, report on that. But don't give us all of the details. We don't have time for it, and I just personally am not interested in it.
Now I can talk.
Thank you. Director Duncan.
No comment.
Director Jacobson.
2 comments. One, it was a fairly productive evening. I think we got some good things accomplished. Second thing is, I think ad hoc committee meetings, probably I don't want to be bored unless it's an action item. But if it's a standing committee, I guess I kind of would like to hear a little bit about what's going on so that I know whether the committee's worth continuing or not. That's it for me.
Director Kellogg.
Mr. Hunt and I have a fundamental disagreement. He doesn't give any report except for action items to the board, just what he talked about. Nothing on details, and whenever I ask for details, I get not told in a nice way to bug off. Often details give you an idea of what direction the committee is going and what they're thinking about. And we welcome comments from other people to tell us what if you think we're going in the right direction or not. And it also gives recognition to the volunteers who are on these committees. Both committees, or 2 committees I have volunteers from the public that have very valid inputs and want to be involved in the decisions that we make as a board and as a district. And they help us a great deal with the information they provide. So to me, in a committee, it's very important to respond with all the details and give recognition to the people involved.
Thank you, Bill. And I have no director's comments tonight. At this time, we're going to adjourn the meeting at 10:08.